Please call the roll and please stand for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda will be approval of the minutes from the August 10th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the August 10th meeting. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Next item will be statement of the bills paid in the amount of $114,389.86.
Mayor, make a motion to approve the statement of bills in the amount of $114,389.86.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve the statement of the bills paid in the amount of $114,389.86. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
And next item on the agenda will be requests or comments from the public. Would you please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gary Carpenter, 11030 Riverview, 11030 Riverview. Just a couple of things. I want to thank you guys for that roundabout down there. All it's doing is causing me nothing but trouble. Not only am I going to lose my whole front yard, all my nice shade trees, but now I just found out through Bonner Springs, with the property across the street from them, they want to put that warehouse in, I guess is what's proposed. And then right in the letter, it says the city wants to reroute the traffic to go around the roundabout, which will put a road right through my property now. Mine and Turley's property will probably lose the way of their market, about an acre apiece, and put it right next to the house that I own on the end of my property. You know, I always disliked those roundabouts. Now I can't stand the damn things. All it's doing is causing me nothing but problems at Harding. Now they can pull the eminent domain. I just went through that process with that city attorney Oric, which is a joke to begin with. That's the worst thing. I wish that all the council had to go through that same thing and put up with that crap that I had to with him. But anyway, I settled. But there's one other thing besides the roundabout. You guys got that plans and everything for a new city hall. You've already bought the property and everything. And my understanding is that you've got a marketing director to find out what kind of businesses and stuff that you can put in to support Edwardsville down here. I'm just wondering why we can't afford to get a marketing director to sell that 1,000 acres that's sitting up there bare. It's been that way for 15 years now, putting all the people up there. I'm tired of going through this stuff. Chuck Adams, I had a conversation with him this afternoon. He said it costs a lot of money. He told me that it's my job to get the neighbors together and sell the property. Number one, this city's the one that caused that zone, commercial wannabe zone. I had nothing, I didn't want it. We're sitting up there waiting, and now we're just going to keep waiting. I don't see how you can get a marketing director for down here when we've been waiting 15 years to sell that property. There's millions of dollars in tax dollars up there. All you have to do is sell the property and get the businesses in it, which should have been done already. Thank you.
If there are no others, we'll go on to the next. Oh, excuse me.
Fred Brandt, 1449 South 98th Street. Just calling to see what I find out about the 98th Street, when it's going to start getting some repairs done. It's terrible. And then I also wanted to thank Chuck Stites and Mr. Webb for jumping right on the railroad ties burning and taking care of that. I appreciate that. That's about all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Are there any others? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is consider authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds for certain public improvements, Riverview Crossroads, including adoption of resolution 2020-09 and 2020-10.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I would like to point out tonight that we have Dustin Avey with us with papers. Did I get it wrong? Sandlin. Sandlin, right? They merged and changed names. I still call it Piper Jaffrey, but Dustin's been with us for quite some time as our financial advisor, probably for about the last 15 years. Tonight, we basically have two actions. The first action is to adopt a resolution that authorizes the project being Riverview Crossroads. As you know, we have previously authorized the project, but we only authorized funding for the design and right-of-way acquisitions. And because we're doing the rest of the financing now through the general obligation bonds, it is the recommendation of legal counsel that we do a second authorization, so it's very clear for the Attorney General because they review these for the authorization. The second part of it is actually authorizing the public sale of bonds on September 28, 2020 at 11 a.m. The par amount of those bonds will be $2,575,000. It is the intent to put the $2.5 million we're going to the project fund. The additional expenses are related to the bond issuance expenses, etc. We actually believe it's likely that there will be a premium. If you recall, on our last bond issue, we had a premium on that one, which means that they pay you more than the par amount. In this case, if we have a premium, likely we would take those funds and reduce the par amount, where in the last one we spread that extra out across the projects at the time. But because this is specific to this one thing, and we know what the dollar amount pretty much is at this point. These dollars are matched with $3 million in federal highway funds to make the improvements to 110 and River. Don't really have anything to add, though those two actions have to occur. First, the authorizing the improvements, and second, authorizing the bond sale. So I would like to give Dustin a quick moment to give you a little market update, and he can help you with that. I do have, if anybody's interested, printed just kind of our 20-year bond schedule. I can give that to you, just kind of a graphic chart that I've shown you in the past that we've updated with this in. So with that, Dustin, I'll turn it over.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Mayor, Council, good evening once again. And as Michael alluded to, really the second action is to allow the financing process to start. Part of that process includes the bond rating process once again, and as you're well aware, the city has done a great job with the bond rating process, and we expect that to be the same again this year. From a timing perspective, we plan to come back with the bids on the bond sale at the meeting on September 28th. Interest rates are at all-time lows. They've never been higher than their current levels, number one. Number two is on recent bond sales in the past month, we have seen more bidders than normal. And we have seen interest rates that have been really unbelievable, to be quite honest. I would not be surprised if interest rates hold at their current levels, that we would see a 20-year bond issue for probably less than 2% interest rate. So from a timing perspective, obviously very good, and again, assuming everything holds the way it is right now, we would see very good results towards the end of September. So with that, glad to stand for any questions, but the two resolutions before you authorize the project and allow us to proceed with the financing process.
Thank you, sir.
Grabbing my items, Mayor. So we would need to hear resolution 2020-09, followed by resolution 2020-10.
Mike, on this, when it mentions 540,000, is that what we've already spent for this project?
We haven't spent all of it, but that's what was allocated to the project. It was a little bit more, it's like 540 and something. But yeah, that's what we've used for the engineering and for the right-of-way acquisitions and some of the miscellaneous expenses like that.
Mayor, make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-09, authorizing the city of Edwardsville, Kansas to construct certain main trafficway improvements, authorizing the issuance of general bonds of the city to pay the costs thereof.
Second.
I'm not gonna repeat the motion, but anyway, the motion has been made and second to authorize the issuance, not the issuance of general obligation bond, but the authorizing the project. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes,
Okay.
it authorizes the project.
Thank you. So would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Speck.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-10, authorizing the public sale of approximately $2,575,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds, series 2020 of the city of Edwardsville, Kansas.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2020-10, authorizing the issue and sale of industrial revenue bonds. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Speck.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be considering authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with McConnell and Associates for the 2020 Shelton and 105th Terrace Street Maintenance Project.
Mayor, this, Dusty will
Dusty's
be
gonna
making
do
the
it.
presentation, so it's his first time, so.
Good evening. Bear with me. I'm asking the city council to consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with McConnell and Associates for the 2020 Shelton and 105th Terrace Street Maintenance Project. This project will be funded through the special highway funds. The low bid for the project was $33,120. City of Edwardsville opened sealed bids on August 13th, 2020. It will include pavement repairs and storm drainage upgrades to the intersection of Shelton Avenue and 105th Terrace. 4 contractors submitted bids for the project. The results are listed. Do you need me to repeat those, or you got those in?
I don't think necessarily.
The original engineer's estimate was $22,665. These bids came in a little higher than that. It's just kind of a small scale project, and it combines some concrete with some asphalt, so it's kind of complex for no bigger than it is. So we believe that's why it went a little higher, but they all seem to be fairly competitive in their range. The staff is recommending that City Council award the sum of the bid items to McConnell Associates in the amount of $33,120 to be funded out of the Special Highway Fund.
I think with that being such a small job, there being such $11,000 difference in there is kind of.
Well, last
I mean, if
year,
it was a $2 million job and it was $11,000 difference, I get it. But we're talking about a total job of $33,000 and we're $11,000 off on that. That's pretty
Well,
significant.
I would say this, last year we put this out and we only got one response and it was 49,000 or something, so.
I
And it
remember
was
that.
part of a combination of other bid projects. I mean, personally, I just think that the engineer's estimate was based on probably a larger job and didn't really take into consideration. But you have 4 bids that range, you know.
Yeah, $6,000 difference
I don't think
from
they're
bottom to top or
Find
something.
it.
But, so why would I guess, so that we have confidence
Right.
in when it's presented to us,
Right.
that here's the number that it should cost,
Right.
22,000, and it comes back that we're spending 33.
Right.
I mean, how do we get confidence in knowing that our engineer's estimate's gonna be close. That, I mean, that's, what, a third?
That's a plus. I mean, I will tell you, in the past, even on our smaller jobs, they've generally been within, 2 to 3%. So
Right.
I've not seen one that's been off by this much. And I don't know if they just said, big projects, asphalt's going, $80 a ton, and when it's a small job like this, because you still have truck hauling and stuff, so it ends up being, and I don't know what the breakdown, $90 or $100 a ton. But, I mean, again, typically, well, this is the only one where I've really found that
Seen
we
that,
had that, yeah, so.
Mike, have we used them before? Have we used McConnell and Associates before?
We have not used McConnell and Sons. One of their, I mean, we did reference checks on them. One of the things they do a lot of work, a lot of asphalt work on is courts, like tennis courts and whatever the new courts that everybody's playing, and tracks. So they do a lot of very specific paving type of work, which in this case is very beneficial. As you know, that area just doesn't have a lot of drainage, so being very, critical in placing that asphalt would be important.
Have they done a lot of storm drain repairs?
I don't know about storm drain. I mean, they do paving and construction work of this type. They've done a lot of work for schools. So, like I said, sports courts, parking lots, lots of asphalt and concrete work. We just haven't used them ourselves. I don't recall them bidding a project.
Where are they out of?
ACM, I believe. So.
Yeah,
Says North Kansas
yeah.
City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here downtown.
Is,
I spoke with BHC about them a little bit, and they said they've been around them some, and they've done good things, and very community oriented from where some of the projects they've seen them do. One item on the cost difference, BHC has estimated $75 for site repairs, and that was all over the board. It went up to $4,000 on McNamara's. So I think that's just a matter of questioning what they might have to go back with, or what we might have to do on yards around there or something. So, but I think they should be able to be relatively not damage anything too much. As far as the storm drain goes, they're really just tying into an existing storm drain, so their curb and gutter and their asphalt. It's just a matter of shaping it to go to the drain, so there's not like underground storm drain work there. So.
Where exactly is this place?
The entrance, Williamson Farms.
Is that the
Yeah,
entrance?
it'll be around the
Again?
center.
We're supposed to visit last year, but it didn't, the bids
Right.
went crazy.
Yeah, this was.
I'm wondering though, Dusty, if it would be beneficial since the McNamee is so close in the bid, if they have a lot more experience in this type of work, if it might be more beneficial too.
From the people I've talked to, I wouldn't say necessarily that they have a lot more experience.
Oh, they don't, okay.
We've used them, though. I mean,
Yeah.
and an $800 difference, and that's kind of, that was where I was gonna go with that too, is, and they're in Kansas, and you know how I like to make sure that we're using, I try to use it, if they're ever in Edwardsville, I want to use somebody out of Edwardsville, then go to Wyandotte County, and then obviously bigger yet, Kansas. And we've used McInerney, and it's $800 more, and I don't know that we've had major issues with them.
It's 1,800, I believe.
It's 18.
Yeah.
Oh, what is
Do you
that?
think we could
What?
see if they match the other price?
You can't
You can't do
do
that.
that.
do that.
You can't do that.
Yeah, well, that's not.
One of the things that, like I said, we did have McNamee do Kansas, and the section that went from as the bend up, they actually did not do a great job on the first round, but they did come back and redo it.
Yeah, they did fix it.
And so they fixed it and repaired it, so they responded very quickly and positively to that, so.
We shared a little bit of that cost with them on those repairs. After I analyzed it, some of that was, I felt like our own road failure beyond the project limits, so.
We're talking about that patch in?
Yeah. so we-
Yeah, that's different, they
Oh,
they messed up that whole
Okay, yeah,
section.
right.
It was pretty rough, and they came back and scraped it off and and redid that section, so.
I think it's good to work with different contractors, and to create a little competition, and get me experience with some different contractors too. I think that could be a positive in it, just to.
Do you feel really comfortable with the McConnell?
From who I've talked to, certainly, yes.
And
And they do have operating, I was just looking back at the site, so, you know, their main ones, they also have offices in St. Louis, Edwardsville, Missouri, I don't know where that's at, in Wichita, so.
Not in Edwardsville.
Down there. I think they do more, I know they do asphalt and concrete work down in Wichita, because I've seen their name pop up on projects along there, so. I spoke to somebody that deals a lot in schools, projects, because I noticed they do a lot of sports courts and things, and I know that has to be pretty fine work, and they said they use it 90% of all their projects, so.
And it may turn out that it's,
Yeah.
they do a great job and
Yeah.
want to use them in the future, so.
McEnany's been good too, I mean, there's nothing, quite honestly, we've worked with all of these companies. I would say, we haven't worked with Amino in a long time. I mean, I know they're located here in Wayne County. They typically are high bid on our projects. I mean, just have been traditionally. They did Wood End Road. I think they did the state portion. They did the state portion of Wood End Road. So Wood End Road, for those around, was a two-part project. There was federal highway funding portion and then a city portion. And they did the federal highway portion on that one.
I make a motion to authorize city manager to enter into a contract with McConnell and Associates for the 2020 Shelton and 105th Terrace Street project in the amount of $33,120.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to authorize city manager to enter into contract with McConnell and Associates for the 2020 Shelton and 105th Street Terrace Maintenance Project in the amount of $333,120. I'm sorry, $33,120. I was going to get everything, wasn't I? Excuse me.
I thought we were getting ready to go down there and start doing 98th Street then.
Anyway, would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Justin.
I should have, maybe it says it in there. What's the completion timeframe?
They were a month out when I last talked to them.
So it's a 2020.
Yeah, that's what, yes. I won't know for sure until I've gotten back to them with the vote.
Well, what we'll do is, so from here, we'll contact them. We have a sample contract that we use on these kind of projects, the smaller projects, so to speak. We've used on a lot of projects, and so we'll get that executed. They have to submit bonds, so it's below the statutory requirement for a statutory bond of $100,000. So they'll be required to either provide releases or can't get paid till the end of the project. Quite honestly, it'll probably be one payout because once they're there, they're going to basically be working that intersection there. And, they'll probably be there a couple, 2 or 3 days to actually work. I would think less than a week, and then be done. So.
Next item would be consider ordinance number 1030, adopting 2020 Uniform Public Offense Code for Kansas cities and with edits and amendments.
As you know, we had some discussion, on this item at our last meeting. There was a couple of questions raised about the UPOC, which is the Uniform Public Offense Code. Again, I'll note that we're not asking for any changes on the standard traffic ordinance because there were no statutory changes to the standard traffic ordinance. So the amendments we already have, which are typically speed limit adjustments in different areas, stay on the book. So nothing changes with that. Really, I think the two areas that we spent time on, or some time on, was one, some information on the section 10.5, which is the unlawful discharge of a firearm. We spent some time talking about 10.6, which has to do more with bow hunting and BB guns and those kind of things, which we've amended in the past to allow it, because under the standard UPOC, basically, you can only discharge those types of things inside a building. So those arrows, BB guns, paint guns, etc., are only permitted inside of a building. We've modified that in years past. I think there's been a question raised tonight or before tonight's meeting with the landowner that's kind of right in the in-between area, and we may want to address that here in a minute. But I think the biggest issue, or the other issue, was the violation of a public health order. So in the ordinance you have before you, that section has been removed in its entirety. So we took out 10.29, which is violation of public health order. So effectively, public health orders can't be heard within the municipal court. So I do want to make it clear that the way these UPOC and SGOs work, they really deal with municipal ordinances and what can be done in municipal court. It doesn't necessarily mean these things that there can't be a charge, they just don't happen in municipal court. They could be into the district court if they wanted to hear it. So it doesn't necessarily say nothing can happen, it's just the way it's decided. I know we talked about that before. So 10.29 is gone. What we're suggesting on 10.5 is to add at the end of A, and we've renumbered this, but at the end of A, we've added the language, the term reckless is defined in KSA 21-5202J as amended, which that is the state statute that specifically defines what reckless is. Now, we're not putting that full definition in the STO, because it just throws up space, but I did include it in the agenda memo in the third paragraph. I won't read through that whole thing, but effectively, when they're talking about reckless, they talk about things that consciously disregards substantial and unjustifiable risk. It generally means some gross deviation that a normal person would have. So, for example, if I set targets up across the road and I'm shooting across the road, well, that's probably not normal. That's pretty reckless. If I'm, shooting on my 20 acres of property and I've got some targets set up and I got a backstop behind me and things, most people would say, okay, that's probably normal. If I'm setting in Williamson's Farms, just shooting around at tin cans and things, that's probably not, that would probably not be a normal action that most people would find acceptable. So while there's a little bit of subjectivity to it, the definition is there and we've defined that in there. The second item that we have added is item C, that says this section shall not apply to the non-reckless discharge of a firearm on one's own property for the sole purpose of target practice by the owners and their invited guests. So again, what we've done is to say it's now allowed, because the way the standard ordinance is, the first section says it's not allowed, and the second section, while it gives a lot of exceptions, those were ones adopted by the state legislature. Those are the ones that get to be very careful not to go modify the state legislature, because are you being more or less prohibited. So basically everything in B, it says if you do these things, then it's not reckless anyways, even though you could potentially be reckless if you're active. Those things are specifically removed. So again, the changes to 10.5 is we've defined the term reckless, so it's clear. Right, anybody can look it up, it's out there, and we've added this exception to allow people on their own properties and their guests to, again, go shoot in a normal process. Again, I think everybody, I've talked to several of you all would agree that, if you set targets up across the road, or just standing out on July 4th shooting up in the air and have bullets coming down everywhere, that's probably not normal practice, and we know what's happening. So I think that hopefully covers that. On the 10.6, we didn't make any adjustments to that. We still have the shoot zone. I believe the map is in there. generally the area north of Swartz Road, I believe it is, yes, is, and I say that broadly, most everything north of Swartz Road is in the shoot zone. And pretty much the areas south of K32 and the areas generally that make up our, what I would call more developed neighborhoods are included. What's created some challenges is you've got some properties within that area that maybe, for bow and arrow or something like that, you got 10 or 12 or 15 acres, it's not a problem. Specifically, the question came up was, we have some individuals who work with 4-H or Boy Scouts, and they're wanting to teach them proper use of a bow and arrow. Quite honestly, we probably would never know about it, probably would never go there. I mean, unless somebody called us, and I don't know why they would call us for something like that. But technically, it is outside the shoot zone. I don't know that I have a great suggestion, though Chief Mathies and I were talking. I think what we could do is one of two things. We could still adopt this tonight. We could revise the map to maybe pick up those areas in there, or we could add some amendment that would allow something that would allow an individual, for training purposes, 4-H Boy Scouts kind of scenario. It would be, where they're under adult supervision or, something like that. Now that's not going to allow hunting on that property, but it would allow the discharge of bows and arrows and the other items in the shoot zone. I'm not sure a great way to handle that, to be quite honest, unless we just revise the map. And quite honestly, if you ask me why the map is the way the map is, I don't know that I can give you an answer other than it's been there. I know Chief Mathies and I have talked about it. That language was put in there well before we even got here and has always been there. So I'm not sure what was used to define those areas. We've never really spent more time on it than that.
Well, I called you today and talked
Right.
to you about it, and I'm not sure, I think everybody received that email. So that gentleman, had been doing this.
Right.
And he just wanted to make sure that he's doesn't get into any trouble. Never had an issue, had no problems with it at all.
Right.
But he says that he watches our meetings, and when it was brought up, he wanted to make sure that he became in compliance. And I appreciate him for doing that. There's such a very small, in my opinion, small portion. Like we said, we don't even know where this map came from, so it doesn't mean that we can't, we could change it anyway.
Basically, I think and maybe this is the way to do it, so if you get pretty much, if you're north of K32, so south of K32 basically got industrial property, industrial commercial, and we have typically what are known as R2 and R3 and mobile home park property, right? So those are the highest density zoning. We then move into our more developed neighborhoods, which generally are what we call rural development with sewer and rural development without sewer. So rural development with sewer, or I think, not rural, I think it's residential development with sewer, would be areas like Williamson Farm where you have traditional houses on lots with sewer. And without sewer, it's generally 1 acre lots, or it's basically 1 acre lots, and they're on septic tanks. Then we go into what's known as R1, which is 2 or 3 acres, and then we go into ag, which is 5 acres. So maybe the best way to do this is to amend our map to include all those areas that are R1 zoning or less intensive, or if you want to say R. So that would basically be R1 and all of our ag residential district, which is going to cover the vast majority of this area, and all of your developed neighborhoods are not in one of those zoning districts.
I would be in favor of that, but also would like to if there is a unique situation where somebody could present, maybe maybe they've got a 1 acre lot,
Right.
but they have the ideal setup for doing exactly what we were talking about, trainings, helping some kids, doing whatever, that they have the ability to come to the city, and there's a process that either the police department or someone can go out and say, we could issue a special use permit after it had been inspected, and we agree, you have a truly safe way of doing this. Not that that's probably gonna happen a whole lot, but as long as there's a mechanism for somebody, it's not just set in concrete, there is a way to potentially get a special use permit on something like that.
Go ahead.
That was kind of my thought too, is I thought, because there are other areas in this no-shoot zone, like on the far west end, on the south side of 32, back in there, that there may be somebody that wants to have a family shoot or something, and not shoot the family, although that may maybe, that would be off.
You have to wait till Christmas.
It would fall under reckless, yeah.
You have to wait till Christmas for
Yeah,
that,
wait till Christmas, that's right.
or Thanksgiving.
And so, but if there's some way of a permitting, because if we move the map, and this individual that we're talking about sells this property to a developer, and it gets cut up into 20 pieces, now it's a residential area, it's in our map, and so we have to rework the map. I think a special permitting is, in the no-shoot zone, is a special permit kind of a situation, where it doesn't sound like this guy does target shooting every weekend. He's doing it with Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, and okay, we know that 3 weeks from today they're going to do some shooting. You come down and get a permit, don't charge for it. They just lets us know it's going to happen. So if the neighbors call, we say that person has a permit to do that, just like we do with fire, with a burning permit.
I wouldn't be me. I don't want him to have to come down and get like a burn permit, like you got to do it all the time. Hey, it's for a year, maybe, in that way, because it's just putting more hassle on that person to have to say, some kids come down over the weekend, or they find out over the weekend, hey, we're gonna be doing this. So I would rather that it not be unit specific, that it would cover a spend.
You mean date specific?
Yes,
Yeah.
so that it's not a year. Well, date specific in maybe a calendar year.
Yeah.
I think what I would suggest is that we can move forward with the adoption tonight as things are presented. I believe, and our city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, it references the map. So I think we could modify the map administratively. Again, I think what we will do, we will look to the map, we will look to those areas that are zoned in those R1 and ag residential, et cetera, and start there and see how that lays over this existing map. And then we can come back with some additional amendment to that section once we've had an opportunity to kind of make sure we covered those areas. But I think the map is really to be handled administratively. And again, I think what makes sense, when you look at the zoning map, I think they're going to match up pretty close to what we're talking about tonight. Probably the areas where you might have some differences is going to be, like we say, on the west end of the city, on property that may be zoned commercial, but is being used for ag purposes, i.e. growing of crops, right? Or the old Holiday Sand plant, right, which is, I think is zoned industrial, right? Those may be those exceptions where we want to bring them in, because they don't have any residential units on them. But in your case that you were talking about, so if that person decided to break up their lot, well now it's rezoned into a lesser zoning district, it would no longer be eligible to be in the shoot zone. And of course, we go through this once a year, and so we could revisit it at least on an annual basis. Not likely somebody's going to subdivide, redo the lot, build houses, and have all that done in a 12-month period. So I think we would have enough window to do that.
Well, and if was it an R1 that you were considering or not?
Yeah, R1 in our zoning code is 3 acres.
3 acres, so anyone with 3
Right,
acres?
and then, I mean, we have some non-conforming R1s, but they're still R1 by zoning, like a 2.6 acre.
One thing that I wanted to mention, I got a few emails and
Okay.
calls after the last meeting. I would like to consider taking out for the sole purpose of target practice, because a couple of people that I've spoken to have agricultural land, they have livestock that they might have to put down or euthanize, they might have to protect their livestock from coyotes or other wildlife. I just feel like that might.
You can already do all this.
Well, in here, it says, the section shall not apply to the non-reckless discharge of a firearm on one owner's property for the sole purpose of target practice.
That's really our addition,
Right.
to make the, we've added an exemption, if you will. Because on its face value per se, in and of itself now, the specific use for target practicing doesn't apply unless you have a private or public range. Okay, so the piece that we're doing, what I understand the thinking, is that we are allowing that because if someone is using good judgment, has the acreage, that kind of thing, the berm, whatever would be safe, would then in and of itself be non-reckless, you would hope. And so that becomes an exemption that we're adding. And so there's one more exemption, so it allows that. But if you need to put a livestock down or defend your livestock, defend your domestic animal, those things are allowed within our ordinance.
I think they're actually allowed under the criminal discharge of a firearm, which is different.
Yeah, just a whole different thing.
Because criminal discharge of a firearm is a felony, so it's completely different from this. But you do, even in here, you have the lawful defense of one person, another person's or one property. And property, whether we like it or not, animals are considered
That would be
property for
included.
law purposes.
Okay, I did
right?
see the property.
Now, don't come to my house and tell me that, but that's a different story. But as I'm sure many of you all like the same thing, so.
Would it be all the same, Mike, if we just adopted it all at once instead of adopting it now and then making amendments to it?
As far as the shoot zone
And
map,
everything, like just do it all at once?
we,
Yeah, instead of adopting it now and then expect amendments to come later?
well, I guess I'm not sure what language to add. I mean, I don't think we want to do a special use permit. That is a zoning category. We don't, which is very lengthy and can be an expensive process, so I don't think we would use that. I mean,
Is there a pro or con to doing it tonight versus another time? Is there time constraints or what?
it's just getting it cleaned up
Just
and
getting it
done.
done.
I mean, like I say, we can amend the map administratively, and then it would just be, at another meeting, it'd just be an ordinance, probably amending the shoot zone. I'll turn it to the city attorney. I mean, if there's some easy language we can add in there that says,
Oh, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting doing it tonight. I'm saying maybe it would be better to
oh,
adopt the UPOP when the changes have been made, instead of adopting it now expecting changes later.
And I agree.
So maybe just table it for the next one. I did want to mention though, that a person or two had asked specifically if we could post the UPOP to our website so it's easily accessible to our community. And I had kind of a hard time finding it as well. So I
Yeah.
thought maybe that would be an easy thing to do.
yeah, we'll probably have a link to, I mean, obviously, it's a lengthy document.
A link would be fine. I think
Yeah.
that would be really helpful.
I don't
And
know.
then
I assume we get that.
We could do that.
I think we have to pay a fee, for the electronic copy.
We already paid the fee, we could do
Okay.
that, we could do
okay,
it.
that would be
Okay, I
great.
see.
And then a couple of folks also asked that once we make our decision, if we could just be very clear in communication because there's been so much confusion up to this point.
Well, and I guess what I would ask, if we're gonna push this to the next meeting, which I understand, is there anything else? I mean, I don't wanna, for y'all's sake or others, come several times. If there's other adjustments, I'm open to making sure we cover those.
I think we're down to just the map, basically.
The map and some,
And how to include the.
that recreational type of use, I think, right.
Right.
Okay,
As long as there's a process for somebody that is non-conforming, just like we issue on buildings.
Right.
A building that doesn't conform,
Right.
you know, we make exceptions, deviations. So as long as there's a process for someone to do that and to be approved or denied, that's all on the map.
And I think that would remove some of the confusion if we just wait and do it all at the same time instead of kind of piggyback on it later.
Now, is that for,
So-
are we just thinking bow hunting, or do we want the whole, as an exception, if I want to shoot my BB gun as well, because they're all encompassed in that kind of one section, just for clarification.
Yep, you can do all that.
All, anything you can do in that shoot zone, we want a special use permit, if you will, for lack of a better term.
A mechanism.
Yep.
So we're gonna table this issue, is that correct?
That's what I'm hearing, yes, sir.
The only other suggestion that two of the people mentioned to me, and just because so you don't come back and then I don't do this again.
Okay.
As a couple of people mentioned, eliminating the shoot zone entirely and just making the word very specific, like no discharge of paintball, BB, airsoft, pellet guns, arrows, or firearms within 100 feet of public school or property lines. Like just making things more across the board instead of a designated area. I just thought I'd mention that since a couple of, I don't know if that's the best case scenario for us, but a couple of people have mentioned that, so.
It starts getting, I will say, the challenge from an enforcement standpoint is, you know, were they 101 feet? I mean, unless you observe them and see them, and it just gets, it gets harder to try to enforce when you get to some of those. I mean, we do
Yeah.
some of that, like, you know, when somebody wants to have a bonfire, right? And we issue a permit, a burn permit on that. We have some very specific distances on that, but that because of the, you know, clearly the danger that it could cause.
I think
But those
generally the
get reviewed.
R1 change will cover most of those scenarios, as long as it includes all this different, the bow and arrow and the BB gun. and-
Well, I think we're gonna start with the map and look at that overlay, see how that overlays, and then see where the exception areas
Well, and it might be good to float that map out to us,
are. Right.
you know, within the next few days, so that we can ponder it and look at it and so forth and so.
There's not a whole lot that could be on here. so
Right, no.
It doesn't
Yeah.
take you much.
But so we're
Yes.
not digging into the details of the meeting.
And I would say to what you were saying as far as the 100 feet and all that, you know what, I appreciate that our citizens are trying to help figure this out. You know, and I don't want whoever sent you that to think that we just poo-pooed that away and it didn't mean anything at all. You know what, because there is a lot of thought in how we make this fair for people to enjoy recreation. And I'm glad that people did take time to reach out to us. I got the email the next day and a couple phone calls, and I'm glad that people were on top of it and trying to make suggestions to get this figured out for everyone, so.
And some of that may be useful for those exceptions.
Right, absolutely.
So if it's a special, and I'm gonna say use a special exception, so, you know,
Non-conforming.
again, I mean, if you take a Williamson's Farm, which is probably one of our more typical residential neighborhoods, but there's probably a couple areas inside there, right, where the detention ponds are at or something like that. Maybe it could be a safe area, I don't know.
Right. That's
But
true.
that may be where you use those kind of, as we look at, somebody says, hey, can I get a special exemption to this? And that may be some of the things that we look at. Well, how close are you to other, you know, houses? How close are you to this? What do your neighbors think? Because believe it or not, most of the time, the way we go to these things, because somebody called us. Right, I mean, they hear gunshots and they call us. They see somebody out bow hunting and shooting a deer across their fence line, and I've got as many of those calls as I've had the other, right? Well, somebody just shot a deer. Well, it's on their property. Well, but you shouldn't shoot deer. Well, okay, but, you know, and you should outlaw killing deer. You know, we get those calls as well.
And I do think because of all of the feedback, that we are moving in the right direction. I saw some conversations on Facebook that people were discussing they have 4 acres, but this were people talking about ag land and livestock being different, but all of them were moving in the same direction of we want to protect this in our city to be able to target shoot, to hunt where it's safe and available, and take care of our animals, so I think we're moving the right way.
I was encouraged that we see or have heard from so many people that are watching it on our outlets or however they're going about doing it and reaching out to us. So they might not be sitting in this room, but it's getting out to some of those folks, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, now to the good fun stuff.
Okay, conduct a public hearing, so we need to,
What I would maybe, well, we can do this two ways. What I might
you want to make the
suggest,
presentation?
let me
then
make
we'll
the
open up the public hearing.
presentation,
Yeah.
then you can have the public hearing,
Okay.
and then you could close the public hearing, then I could follow up addressing any comments that maybe come out of the public hearing, and then council can have its discussion, so.
Go ahead.
I'll let, well, I need my, or am I able to? meet
Yes, sir.
today? Okay. Okay. So we're at the 2021, kind of the final of our budget. Our critical success factors that you all already know and love. You know, I am gonna say this on this slide. I think it would be a good time this coming year for us to get back together again and reevaluate our goals for the goals of Veteran City. Because it's been 5 years or 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
since we got together and did these. So I think it's, you know, I think that's valuable. I don't think it's something that has to be done every single year for an organization of our size. But I do think it would be valuable for us to get back into a room with a facilitator and kind of readdress these. Are there new goals? Are there, you know, things that we want to take off the table, just processes and things like that. So I will probably, you know, look into that after the first of the year to see if we can't gain anything. Where I want to start at tonight is kind of in follow-up to our August 10th budget workshop. There was a number of items that were raised during that meeting, and hopefully I can try to address some of those tonight. The first thing was there was questions about, well, how's our budget look over a longer period of time and by departments, which we'll get into. So what I wanted to show, which I don't think is too much of a surprise, our budget has grown by only 2.88% annually. So over each year since 2017 to 2021. Obviously, some years grew more, some years grew less. Obviously, this year we're about as flat as we're going to get. The two areas where we saw any increases over that period of time was pay and benefits and some in contractual services. Again, I think you would expect, especially in the pay and benefits, as part of our pay plan, we have always done our step and grade plan in there. And so you would expect that to go up, and some of the benefits are tied to pay. And then contractual services really get around some of the professional things that we do, you know, hire outside courts, things like that. So just to note, the medical dental vision during that time from 17 to 2021, so just the medical dental vision cost that the city pays, if you took that to about $269,000, if you took that out, your 5.03% payroll comes into about 3.3. Again, pretty much close to our 3% annual step increases that we do. Kind of break down that some more. Obviously, the step and grade plan is the step and grade plan. But overall, medical dental vision has grown by about 15%, and these are annual numbers, so annualized numbers, right? So last year was probably the worst year as it related to medical. Typically, we budget around 9% increases, but last year was just a bad year in the market. As you know, we're in a self-insured pool of cities. I can tell you that some cities went out and said, let's get a better deal, and they came back and said, there's not really a better deal out there. It's just kind of the nature of this. Retirement, and again, some of that's tied Some of that's tied to payroll, right, as people are paid more, it goes up. But also, both Capers and KPF have had increases, and those are set statutorily. So if you remember a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion about the pension plans not being able to be supported. Capers made a number of changes to their plan, including increasing every year the city's contribution until I think this is the year we've reached the top, which is about 9.8%. Fire and police are treated differently. They are a self-supported plan, but on average, you're looking, so as a percentage of pay, it's between 22 and 25%. So every dollar spent costs about 22 to 25% as it relates to retirement in the KPF plan. And then workers' comp has gone up this 7.29, and that's about a $20,000 hit. So altogether, those items right there, not including pay, represents 66% of the total budget increase over the past from 2017 through proposed 2021. So again, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody here, but we wanted to go back and kind of look at the numbers and get the breakdown in there. And most of that, there's not much areas in controlling those costs. I mean, there's some. Obviously, we do things to try to keep people safe, reduce their, exposures to things that increase workers' comp. But anybody that's worked with workers' comp knows it's pretty well a state-driven plan. They kind of set the thing, and really it's just a discount of what your plan provider, which we're in the KMIP plan, which is a public pool plan, and your own experience ratios. And when you look at the market as a whole, police, fire, and public works tend to be pretty high on the areas of exposure, right? Because they're high exposure areas of work. What hasn't, go ahead. Oh, I thought I heard somebody ask a question. What hasn't driven our budget, honestly, is increased staffing. Because we've only added one position in the general fund in all of this time. And that was last year's request to add the grounds, building and grounds maintenance position to support parks and the cemetery. The other position that's listed in here is in the sewer fund, and so that fund is self-supporting, and that was our wastewater person, which came in 2018, but is not funded by taxes at all, so none of the costs associated with that position. So there's only been one tax-supported position here in the last 5 years that they added.
Mike, that position is not filled?
That's correct.
I just want to be sure.
Well,
The
what
part-time
we've done, he's effectively, we've taken an internal person and switched that person over, and so he had been doing that job, which has left us short kind of on the public works side. Again, we were fortunate we had our public works person on board until recently, and so that's where effectively the fill will come into the public works. The other area that I noted earlier, property and liability insurance. Again, some of these aren't necessarily dollars and percentages from who they are, but about $30,000 increase in property liability. And when you see it in the budget, it all falls on admin. So we don't allocate out the property liability and say, okay, you got cars and you got a truck and you got this, and we're going to take the council and you all were covered under property liability. The judges are covered, right? Those kind of staff people are all covered as it relates to property liability issues. So there's that. And the other area, it's just been in the court, about $12,000. Basically, the prosecutor, the judge, and the public defender, and really just driven by activity.
Can you tell me, Mike, on the 6.98 and 4.42, is
Yeah.
that increase in the last year, in the last 5
I
years?
believe that's over the period of time that we're talking about.
Over the last 5?
Yeah. Just the difference between 2017 and 2021 proposed. Right. So some of those areas are going down. So you know, those are the areas that have been pushing those two areas in the budget. The other thing I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, because I know that we've talked a lot about mill levy and taxes and the difference between mill levy and tax burden, and I really want to spend a little time showing that. So this chart here basically shows that from 2016 to 2020, because the tax years are always behind the budget year, right? That I literally took y'all as my sample collectively and compared that to basically our overall increases in value. And believe it or not, y'all collectively are pretty common to the rest of the residential market, right? I think we have people in here that come from different types of housing, size of lots, et cetera. But you're collectively a good overall pool. So on average, and what we did is we took the current year and we backed it back down based on what has happened in our total valuation over these years. But you would have seen, if you had this house back in 2016, it would have been valued at a little over $148,000. And today that house at 5.06% would be valued a little bit over $178,000. So about a $30,000 increase in that. I don't know if that's absolute, but it's probably a pretty fair representation of what we have. The reason why I point to 5.06 was it's going to get clearer in the next couple of slides. So then we look at levy by entity. And as you see, there's only one entity that's had a reduction in the total in their mill levy, and that's been the city consistently. And why that's important is a couple of reasons. If you look at the total mill levy reduction in the county as a whole over this period of time, total reduction in total mill levy, it's gone down 2.72 mils. And you pretty much can say, thank you, City of Edwardsville, for giving the overall mill levy down. Because what we see, what you would expect, the state, right, they never change their mill levy. They're 1.5, values go up, they're getting 5% more income. So every year they're getting 5% more. As you can see, the county's been up and down a little bit. The school district had 1 year where they had a drop, but pretty much everybody else has stayed relatively level in their mill levy. And again, we all know that the mill levy is not necessarily, while you can adjust the mill levy, it doesn't necessarily adjust what you're paying in taxes, right? And that really gets us to this next slide. So just as you would expect, on the left is the state. Their revenue's grown over the 5 years. They've grown 5.06% in revenue. The county has grown 5.41%. So their tax burden is growing at a faster rate. Now we're talking about Edwardsville, right? Tax burden in Edwardsville. So the county tax burden is increasing faster than the value of the house increase. And you see that pretty much across the line. The school's slightly under it. But where you see the biggest drop off is at the city. Because we're the only ones that have been making adjustments to the mill levy as the value has gone up. Everybody else has pretty well taken a position of, let's not adjust our mill levy. We didn't adjust the mill levy, so we didn't increase taxes, right? I understand the argument, it's been done a long time, right? But in this case, the only reason there's any property tax relief here is these things. Now, do we control those other things? Not necessarily, but I do think that there's questions that need to be raised about those other entities and how it impacts our taxpayers here in Edwardsville. But I say this and not to brag, but I mean that we collectively are giving the best tax relief to our citizens, and we're doing it somewhat at our loss in the sense of who provides the best services to our citizens. Who provides the most direct services? Right? It's the city. I mean, the city's the one providing police protection, fire protection, plowing the streets, fixing the streets, taking care of the parks. None of these entities are doing any of those things for the citizens. And I'm not saying they don't have value, but they're on day to day, they're not doing those things in our county. So, I just wanted to bring that, kind of set the stage there. Hopefully I answered some of those questions. Again, was where's kind of our overall increase and a little bit better understanding of tax code. And if there's questions, I'll stop there, but then we can go into the actual budget and then, like I say, open the public hearing and then have Q&A after that. Okay. So most of what you're going to see here going forward, you've already seen, but for the purposes of the public, we want to make sure that it's available. So overall, we're recommending a proposed budget of $6,239,075 for the general fund. That is in comparison to 2020, was $6,144,353. Again, remember what we do here is set the expenditure side of the budget. We obviously like to have the revenues cover the expenditures, but at the end of the day, when we adopt the budget, we're really adopting the expenditure side of the budget. As you can see, that is about a 1.5% increase on the overall expenditures. So we're growing by 1.5%. Again, well below the 2% or 3% of value growth in the houses. On the tax side and total revenues, we are expecting to be a little flat and off, I think, in the areas that you would expect. Sales taxes, we know gaming revenue is off and will probably stay off. I think there's still some questions as to how much that's going to open up and when and what that's going to do overall. Franchise fees are down a little bit, mainly by just usage, less usage. Some by our commercial customers. Hopefully, I think that one will likely be a better recovery than others. The rest of them you see there are what they are. A number of, and I think we're fortunate because our property tax base in the commercial industrial area pays 70% of the property taxes in this city. So what we've seen through the coronavirus is that those have stayed pretty stable. And as we know, more and more of those are coming off our IRBs. And that's probably helped if those cities that are highly reliant on sales taxes are really having a difficult time because they either have to offset it with property taxes or offset it with big cuts. And I think because we well managed our fund balances over the year, we're able to weather the storm, which is why we have a fund balance to keep the cash balance, so that when you have these storms, and we will have another one someday, just as we've had them in the past, it's about properly managing these funds and making sure we're ready to go. This is just kind of a summary of by general departmental entities. Nothing new to show you there. As we showed you last time, your admin is going up a little bit. Again, most of that are those property liabilities, those kind of things that get captured in there. Some of the court costs that state court fees and those kind of things we have to pay. Public Works and Parks, it's really a flip-flop. That mainly has to do with the cemetery and the cemetery operations, and we move those costs from one to the other. Fire EMS has some increase, and police department is a decrease. No new staff, no new big buys, no real changes in some great capital items within the general fund where it's tax support.
Remind me again, what is the contingency?
The what?
The contingency down at the bottom?
Well, that's our total, this is our total, our contingency. Oh, the contingency in this case is for the COLA adjustment and the pay plan review.
What was that again?
The COLA adjustment's about 25,000 of it, and 20,000 of it is the pay plan that we were talking about changing our exempt pay plan to bring it down from 16 or 18 grades to 5 or 6. And then COLA is a mid-year.
For the exempt employees?
Yes. And a COLA adjustment mid-year COLA adjustment for all.
For everybody,
Right,
including the exempt?
yes, at least that's how it's budgeted.
So they're getting, the exempt are getting the COLA plus the extra?
Maybe not every person, it's because we'll be adjusting, so some would get none, and some might get 3%, some might get 1%. And I think we need to look at the COLA and that together on the exempt side. We just have set aside dollars to say, we definitely want to do a COLA, because I don't know what's going to do with the pay plan. So we want to make sure we have that 1.5% mid-year, so it's not even for a full year, it's mid-year, in there, and it's based on total salaries. And then we put aside 2% of exempt salaries into a pool that represents $20,000. And we'll come back to you all with a plan within that or lower dollars for future approval. So,
Will that plan be brought to us before the COLA,
yes.
So that it's all?
Yeah, it'll be brought concurrently. So it's really looking at the pay plan overall. I mean, we've talked about this almost every single year. We know that we have a number of areas where we are under. Generally speaking, we are good in, if I take the non-exempt classes, right? For the most part, we're pretty good in the start area. We've made adjustments. For example, we talked about this about the fire department. So instead of having firefighter and then firefighter paramedic, and quite honest, and those two are for the most part doing the same job every day. So we put everybody in one pay grade. Right? Done the same thing there that we're talking about doing elsewhere. So they're all in the pay grade, and then we give a premium to the paramedic, right, for that skills and training. But every firefighter at that, so the firefighter level, that has made it so we're more competitive at the entry level to try to hire people. Typically speaking, we don't hire people at the first step in our pay plan. We generally have to go in 2 or 3, sometimes 4 steps out of a 7-step plan to hire people.
Probation period?
Oh, yeah. Fire and police have a 1 year, and so, yeah, so they typically have a 1-year probation period for on the street stuff. Now, if it's an administrative person, it's 6 months. Okay. So this just breaks down the things that are in the budget. Again, for the most part, if I look at this particular department, the things you have in there, is probably the biggest single change in payroll and benefits was a change in an individual's health insurance. So they took a different plan, and that increased the cost there. And then mainly in the material and services, for the most part, that's state court costs and court-related costs. Right? I mean, just it costs more. So if we're generating more revenues by fines and fees, we have to pay more to the state. I mean, they get their share first. That's the way it works in the state court costs. Even if we waive the fine, we have to still collect the state court costs because they don't waive state court costs.
And for equipment on there, we're going from
We had last year in the equipment, if I'm correct, right, that was some of the improvements that was intended to be done. Is that the big reduction on equipment?
Yes.
So we had planned to make some improvements in that area with the carpet and some of those things that we held off on, and we've taken it out for this year. Felt like that was an area to reduce cost.
Carpets, using contracted folks for building out with the additional office equipment that we've got in that area over there.
Yeah.
We had some computer equipment that's captured in there that obviously we don't need computers for that same staff member the next year. So that kind of goes into those reductions.
Percentages often look like, I mean, that's a pretty big reduction from 8,300 to 750, but I mean, that's just one of those areas where we're trying it, again, as the direction of the council, come back to us with as flat of a budget as you can give to us. The police department, as you saw before, actually is a reduction, kind of across the board. Some of the same kind of situations there, just trying to be more fiscally prudent this year. As you know, last year we had some capital cost around the K-9 program, and so, as we said then, those were one-time expenses. So we don't just budget it again because we had it last year, right? There has to be a value in doing that. So I guess the police department runs the award this year for the biggest cut in the world. Over on the fire department, while there is some increase in there, mainly it's around a couple of areas. Some of it's in pay, and some of it's medical expenses, workers' comp is up, and more medical supplies. I will say one of the things that the chief brought forward that we're doing is we've actually reduced the overtime budget. So we've taken that down, and in lieu of that, we are using, where we can, using part-time people and volunteers. Now, again, you can't 100% depend upon that. I mean, you have to have people in trucks and ambulances to make them go. But we're doing that, so it pushes up some of our part-time salaries, and some of that ends up increasing our FICA and Social Security. So, but the net is less money being paid in those pay-related items than we would with full-time people. So that's something that's in the budget. I didn't really mention it last time, trying to utilize those. And the challenge with part-time in any area is finding them and then having the skill sets available that they can participate. Obviously, with paramedics and things like that, I mean, it's already a tough market out there. But we have used successfully in the past using part-time people that came on board, and then some of them have gotten their training as paramedics and then been able to come on when we've had an opening and been needed. So it's worked really well. I appreciate the chief taking that approach to try to keep our payroll costs in, but at the same time making sure we provide a first-class service to our citizens in the police and fire department. Public Works, again, really the biggest issues here is the switch between the cemetery being in Public Works and it being now in the cemetery fund. And so really it's just some reductions there. I will say though, even though a line item is a reduction, we did increase the amount of street maintenance by an additional $5,000. So we were at 35, we're putting 40 down. Street maintenance is everything from small pothole patching to signs to anything like that that's in the right of way that we have to go repair, replace, striping, crosswalks. I mean, you can't really particularly pick a single year and say, what are you going to do? We kind of break it up into some areas and try to address things, but it goes, just when you think you've got it figured out, somebody goes along and knocks down a bunch of signs, and if you don't know who knocked them down, you still got to go put them up. So the police is really good about helping us when they can, and we do go after recovery when we know somebody's damaged. So, probably the biggest decrease in the capital outlay is last year we had put $10,000 in the budget for our salt dome. We were planning to buy it from a third party, but our Public Works folks over the summer spent some time constructing one. So I would call it a long-term solution, but it now provides us cover over our salt, and hopefully that will help us be able to buy salt earlier in the year and keep it dry. Because the problem was, we put it in the bin, you try to cover it with a tarp, the tarp gets torn up, ripped up, blown off, and then your salt gets water on it, and anybody knows what happens when you put salt, put a little water in it, it gets clumped up, so same problem there. And again, just kind of the opposite over here in Parks and Rec. Like I say, it's moving those costs over there. So just a quick highlight, we've talked about compensation. Again, I think, as we've talked about before, this is an area we need to continue to watch. We need to stay competitive. I know it's always hard to watch the market. I don't think we've ever used the market to be Overland Parks or Lee Woods or, Wichita or some of the things. Occasionally, we've had people leave. We've had officers go to the Secret Service at the White House. We've had people go to Overland Park into the paramedic firefighter thing. So we've had people leave for those places, but I would say most of our people stay here because they enjoy the work environment. We provide for good benefits, and we continue to strive to provide reasonable pay. We won't be the highest paid, and we know we can't necessarily compete in all those places, but we do need to have a good pay plan in place, be consistent, and grow it. One of the things we haven't done well from when we originally put this pay plan in 10 or 12 years ago is it was designed at the time with 5 steps. Step 5 was market pay. The assumption was every year we would adjust our market pay by COLA. So then somebody could come in at step 1 or 2, and when they got to the top, the COLA would keep up. We haven't done that on a consistent basis. We have made adjustments, we've added steps, but we really haven't kept up that pay plan the way we should. And it, it's been fiscal, it's been a number of things, but it is something we need to keep continually looking at and trying to make adjustments when we can. There's no new staff in this department, in this budget, so we're maintaining the staff that we have. I think we could probably make arguments for the need for additional staff in any department, but we also understand coming out of this, or I don't know if we're out of it yet, but dealing with COVID and some other things that we need to, again, kind of tighten the belts, and that's what we've done. As I said earlier, we're increasing funding in street maintenance. We know that's a high important item to the community, and we want to continue to do that. Public safety, I didn't say this earlier, but it does include a drone in the police, based out of the police department, even with the reduction in cost. So as you know, we've had people talk about that. It's a great tool, and that's what it is, a tool to assist in any number of items. It's the type of item, unfortunately, we saw drowning in the river this weekend. I don't know if drones got deployed on that particular thing, but you have people standing on the bridge looking at. That's the kind of tool that we could have had there in a very short period of time to begin that search. And so it's not a toy, it's a tool. I know sometimes people, well, that's just a toy. No, we're not flying around with a toy, it's a tool. And then again, parks and cemeteries, we talked about just the switch overs.
I think I had a quick question on that last slide.
Yes.
Compensation, it listed, is it 3% step increase across the board? Or
Yes.
is that, so then just the exempt personnel get an additional 1.5 on top of the 3%?
No. So the 3% is the pay increase across the board. That's the steps.
For non-exempt and exempt.
Yes.
Everybody's getting 3%.
Everybody gets 3%. Now, I say that with one exception. If you're at the top of the pay plan, so you're at step 7, and I don't know how many we have, I know we have a few. A couple of years ago, we had 30% almost at the top, part of the reason we adjusted. In those cases, what we have done historically is they get a 1.5% one-time pay. So they don't get a step because there's no more steps. It doesn't adjust the pay, it's just a longevity payment is really what it
Like a
is.
bonus?
A bonus. We can't use bonuses in local government, so it's a longevity payment.
So would this be 3% for every employee, but the exempt would end up getting 4.5%? Is
No.
that one?
3% steps across the board.
Okay.
We have put into the budget, right, 1.5% COLA, so we would adjust that pay plan by 1.5 mid-year. That that's a final decision. We're budgeting for that. The assumption in the budget is that it covers all employees, exempt and non-exempt.
The 1.5?
Yes.
So everyone across the board would get 4.5?
Well, it's mid-year, So it doesn't go into effect until July 1,
So when would the 3% go into effect?
January, first pay period in January. That's how we've always done it, first pay period in January.
So ultimately, by this time next year, it'd be 4.5% across the board. Proposed.
Yeah, I mean, in
I'm
a
just
sense,
trying
yeah.
to, maybe it's how it's working.
Not in an annual pay, but yes, so yes. And then the pool is really to look at that market adjustment. I mean, again, we've come to you several times, there's been some discussions, and I mean, I've had some of y'all say, what are we gonna do about that? I don't have an answer for you here tonight to say, this person is gonna get this much more, and this person this much, and this much more. We know that there's deviations out there. We've adjusted some of those in the non-exempt areas. We've been able to do that. We've not touched the exempt areas at all. And exempt covers everything, department heads down to lieutenants.
Right, that's why I was just wondering if
Right.
it would be more beneficial to separate the two.
We can't, again, it's really a bucket of money. I mean, whether I put it in the budget or I put it in the fund balance, it's the same dollar. We just wanted to be transparent and say, we're gonna put this bucket of dollars here so we can have this discussion about the pay plan. It may end up being that we say, let's do a 2% COLA adjustment across the board.
Zach, did you have something?
Yeah, just real quick. So when Councilmember Shriver had that question about the contingency in that earlier table, that 45,000, that's the 1.5%. Those are the mid-year adjustments. So when we're looking at the budget and all the individual departments, and you look at payroll and benefits, that's including the 3%. So that's built in there. That $45,000, that's the total estimate of the mid-year adjustments for the 1.5% COLA. And then the $20,000 exempt adjustment.
So why do it mid-year then?
Well, I'd be happy to do it first of the year.
No, I want to know why.
Just trying to be more, I guess, financially, fiscally conservative, trying to keep the budget as flat as possible.
And I think there's some unknowns too as to how sales
My preference would
taxes.
be to go ahead and move it. I mean, it's much easier to do it the first of the year.
Or not?
Well,
I'm just saying.
yeah, I mean, if we want to do that, I mean, quite honestly, if you did that, whether you do the two together or just put it all together at one at the first of the year, put it all together, dollar-wise, it's going to be.
Because whatever changes at mid-year
Right,
will be in effect next year.
2022. Yeah.
I mean, so.
Right, absolutely.
Right, I mean, that will become the,
They want to do it the
you
whole
know,
year, won't work.
If you did it for the whole year, that number would be 90,000.
Yeah.
yes. Well,
No, it'd be about 50,000 total. 25,000 of it is 1.5%. So my point is, if you say, let's do the 1.5 COLA for the whole year, and you want to take out the market adjustment, I'm good. It's dollars are roughly the same. Right? I mean, what I found is, what I've been trying to work on is, we do have some disparity in places, right? And so how do you correct those? And a lot of it's just time. I mean, it's like any pay plan. If any of you know, and I know Ms. Shriver probably worked with lots of these. I mean, you put them in place and you work through them, and over time, the best laid plan, pretty soon, people are here and here, and at some point, you try to bring them back into the pay plan. And when you do that, undoubtedly, you're gonna have some people that are gonna get 0 or 1. I mean, if you're gonna put it in percentages, and some are gonna get 3 or 4 or 5, but now you've got like positions making like dollars, and that's really the purposes of it.
Creeping change.
Yeah, and so it just, the thought was, if we could set aside a little bit of money, spend some time looking at that, and come back and say, okay, this position should be, these 3 positions are doing like type things, right? I'll pick police and fire, I mean, these 2 have the largest departments in the city, right? They're specialized. They literally deal in life and death every single day, right? I mean, they have very, they're representing 2/3 of the total workforce, right? So you would think those should be relatively comparable, right? The Public Works Director has a number of people. But my Finance Director, quite honestly, he doesn't have anybody that works for him, right? So I'm not sure that an adjustment is justified there. I mean, if I just said all department heads are gonna make the same amount of money, I don't think that would be equitable in the paces. And so really, I was just trying to put some money aside so we can come back and say, here's what we think's an equitable plan, you concur or not concur.
Well, I think that we're very fortunate to even be discussing raises at all,
I agree.
because our neighbors to the west
Yep.
put a freeze
Yep.
and aren't adjusted anything at all when we're in this pandemic. So I think that we, again, are very fortunate that I mean, there's folks out there that have lost their jobs. My household took a $20,000 a year hit during this, not a raise, a hit, a deduction. So I mean, I'm glad for folks to make more money. I'm not against that at all. But we're in a very unique position that we're able to even be discussing giving raises. So I think that we need to make sure that we're doing all we can to get through until the lean times right now, until we recover out of this.
Well, and I'm gonna,
We already know that there's a $300,000 shortfall in our budget from our projection, right? Isn't that what we ended up saying, that what we projected in 2020 looks like we're going
to estimate it,
Yeah.
a couple of months ago, yeah, I know sales taxes come in better than I don't know exactly our estimate,
I was thinking it was around 300 is what we were saying.
We're looking on the revenue side,
Mike, I
at
pulled it
this
up.
point is 100,000.
So,
Now,
so I mean, just goes, whatever the number is, $100,000, $200, $300, $50, where it's just showing that we, you know, I mean, people beside us, you know, and around us are putting freezes on. So, again, I'm not saying I'm against anybody getting a raise. I just want to make sure that we're, you know, not moving too fast.
Well, and I would say, you know, yes, that's true, that some places are doing furloughs and other places are doing pay raises across the state. I think in our situation, I mean, number one, if I'm gonna look to Bonner and their pay plan and ours, their pay plan is better than ours for what they did a year or two ago. I mean, their starting salaries for, they don't have full-time fire, but their starting salaries for a lot of their people are greater than ours.
But you just said we're not hiring people in at starting salaries either.
Well, I would say
You said
even.
we're hiring in at 2 or 3 steps up.
When we hire somebody, part of the reason we have to push it up is because that, I mean, I think one of the things I would say is our communities are different too, right? They're a heavily dependent on sales tax community.
Right.
We are not heavily dependent on sales tax community. So, you know, and I'm not saying they didn't do a good job or others didn't do a good job, but we've done you know, I think collectively over the years, and again, I know you probably heard my song and dance, but 15 years ago, we were $275,000 in the hole, no bond rating, cutting people, cutting staff. Things were not in good shape. Today, we're sitting here with almost $1 million in the bank, a AA- bond rating. We can actually talk about doing programs and projects, and I think we've done a great job of managing, and I think we have great employees.
And I started off by saying, I think we're very fortunate
Yes.
that we're in a position to be talking about raises.
Absolutely, I agree.
And Mike, while we're on this particular general fund highlights, I'm not suggesting it for this particular year because I know our revenues are going to be lower.
Right.
But when will we be able to talk about doing a larger repair project, 98th Street, 94th Street, 102nd Street? When can we start tackling those for some of the draining gutters needed downtown?
Well, okay, so there's several questions in there, right? So 98th Street, we have two things related to 98th Street, and by 98th Street, we're generally talking about 98th Street north of Kansas Avenue, because that's what we've allocated funds for. So, right, we allocated in the 2019 project funds out of the debt, we allocated money to do the preliminary design and right-of-way acquisition, just as we did for 102nd Street. So we have a preliminary design, and then we finished the right-of-way acquisition. We have that in place to go out, hopefully fairly soon, to get that started. We issued, or we went out to STP, which is the Surface Transportation, same program with funding 110th and Riverview. That project, was a $7 million project, got highly aligned, which means it's going to get, I won't say to get well scored, but being highly aligned means that that project's in alignment with what the regional council believes the funds should be used for. That certainly is to our plus. We'll know that in September. I think September, October is when they'll make the recommendation. It'll probably be November before it gets all the way through to the MARC board and approve it when it goes through. But generally, what comes out of the planning committee, which is the one I serve on, most of the time it comes out of there, that's pretty much the funding recommendation. Now, there's a lot of projects out there, a lot of funding, and we have some things going against us. You know, somewhat population size, the number of vehicles, and quite honestly, we've been pretty fortunate to get dollars and cents. Down here, as far, I'm not sure, well, we have the 4th Street project, it's funded. We've been waiting more for the UG, because it's supposed to be part of the UG project. We have 2 properties we need to finalize. Everybody's donated the necessary temporary construction easements. We have 2 we just need to finalize with. And so I think that project I think we're going to just move on with that project with railroad or no railroad, right? And get our portion of it done. And then, you know, it may look a little, I was looking for the right word because we're on TV. It won't look as nice for 100 feet either side of the railroad as it should. Until the railroad gets in, it does what they do.
What if that never happens?
It won't, from the road wise, it won't really matter. I mean.
But will it still look bad from either side?
Well, I say
You
look
said-
at, I mean, we can go, the county portion is supposed to cover the 100 feet on either side. The last time I talked to them, they're gonna go ahead and do their part too. So the medians and that pavement, that's why we wanna have, I guess when I say we, the county and us go out and get that work done and let that, really the crossing, it impacts the sidewalk crossing because the sidewalk won't be connected behind the travel arm because until they put the proper crossing piece in, it won't be usable for that purposes, but we'll have everything else in play. Drainage will be in play, everything like that.
And I didn't mean to take away from your question at all, and I don't know if you got the answer that you were looking for, but you said Kansas North.
Right.
I mean, what about Kansas South?
Well, we've not put it, well, we did put funding in.
No.
We did put funding in on 98th Street a number of years ago, and that project never went forward either.
So, I mean, we're here, we're
Sure.
talking about this, and it's our budget. I mean, I'm ready to commit right now to say that we put money in this budget to get 98th, something done with 98th Street from K32 to Kansas Avenue.
I think you're talking a bonded project. I mean, you don't have
So
enough funds.
I don't care what we do.
Right.
But I mean,
Right.
I was down there, as you were, you know, you just went through there to look around, and I'm sure that you probably thought, man, I'm glad I don't have very many fillings in my teeth, because they would fell out.
There was a bird, like, it was almost like a bird bath in a pothole last week when I was like, oh, she's taking a little
Oh, yeah,
bath.
don't mess with them, they're about to hatch. We've had them for a while. No, but I'm serious, I'm serious. We've had oil pans get torn off of cars, it's dangerous. I don't know, I mean, I don't know if it's chip and seal, if it's, or what we gotta do. But I'm ready to, we talk about a lot of different things, and I'm ready, we need to do something with 98th Street. So, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm ready to.
Well, I think probably what it looks
If
like.
money's right now, it's not, if we just heard from them saying that this is the best time ever to borrow money, let's get 98th Street fixed.
Then I would say this from that question. Do we want to expand the debt borrowing? Because if we do, now it's time to go tell them, don't do those resolutions, we're gonna adjust.
How long do we have to,
Because it's a
How
lot
long
cheaper to issue debt once than 2 or 3
yeah, I
times.
agree, and you know, I don't know how anybody else will, this is just me saying it, anybody else may say no, and we don't want to do that.
Right.
Seems to me I've heard in the past that just filling holes from 32 to up the north is $1 million project, just filling holes.
And
And if you really want to do it right, it's $1 million a mile.
at least.
And so, what is that, about 6 miles, 5 miles?
I wouldn't change it.
No, we're talking 32 all the way up to the north end.
Depends.
4 miles.
At least probably 4.
Well, I thought we were talking clear up to the
No, that's a
bridge.
different project. I mean, that's in the,
Well,
Yeah, but
that's
we
only,
haven't
that's only
funded that.
acquisition.
We funded the design.
Yeah, the design and the right of way is all that we're talking about there. So you're maybe talking 800,000 a mile instead of $1 million a mile. So if you do the whole thing, we're looking at a $5 to $7 million project to do it so that I guess the concern has always been in our discussions is we spend $1 million and 3 years later we got to spend another $1 million and 3 years later we got to spend another $1 million filling all these holes and falling off the side and not just tearing out a section. And tearing out a section doesn't make much sense because we still have the old road base and everything underneath.
and I think it goes into, if you go back with something, there's a whole lot more. The right-of-way's gotta be expanded for
That's the
width.
problem.
I mean, there's a lot of, if we decide to go a full-blown deal, you know, that's sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. So, and I don't know if that's what we're talking about. You know, I remember as a kid, and I think it's just called, they used to come down 98th Street, and I think that's how long ago it's been, since I was about 10, that they used to do, what is that called, chip and seal, or grind and replace, or something, I don't know, what's the cost?
I don't know, I mean, chip and seal certainly is a less expensive option. Chip and seal gives you 3 to 5 years of road surface. Doesn't fix hills, dips, holes, whatever. So you really have to first attack those issues through there. You won't do anything to help them with. And part of the problem, and that part of the problem is you got no drainage and slopes. I mean, I guess the question I have really is what is the scope of the project we want them to look at, right? So we could go out for, you know, whether we want to use VHC or use, you know, go out for you know, professional services, right? And have them design to what we would generally, you know, for a state project, it's field chip, right? And that's, you've got a pretty good idea, and you all saw that on Riverview. By that point, you know how much right-of-way you're gonna need, you know where generally, you know, what the road looks like, curvature, you know, those type of things. You're not down in detailed budgets at that point, but that's kind of the first phase that kind of is, okay, let's check off and see, is that what we want? Right? And I think we have, for the portion Kansas City, Kansas Avenue North, 98th Street going north, I think that is $300,000 to $500,000 in engineering fees to get to that same point.
Now, is that north of the bridge, the
Well, when we built that
Because
intersection,
those widths are already wide.
some places it is. I mean, one of the benefits of going north because of the highways, you probably don't have to get right of way through there. But the project, when we built Kansas Avenue and why we came north on 98th Street a little bit, part of that would have to come out to get rid of the hill on the other side and deal with the drain. But we knew that going in, that we were gonna lose, a few hundred feet.
I don't think, and I may be wrong, and hopefully people will respond by email or text or phone calls or whatever. I'm not sure that people are necessarily looking for curbs and gutters and sidewalks in that area. I think that they're looking for a road they can travel that is not dangerous.
I agree with that. I mean, we were on gravel roads, we're a smoother ride. I think that when you get north of 435, even south, a lot of people are concerned with losing their whole front yard because we're going so far. And then when you get into sidewalks, who's gonna maintain those, who's gonna have to shovel those? Right now in our ordinances, that all falls on the property owner. But if we can kind of just get down to the necessity of a functional roadway that's safe, that isn't gonna tear up vehicles. And Dusty, you might know the answer to this. There was a street survey or chart or something. Is 98 the worst case scenario in our city?
I don't know for sure specifically on that.
Was that
Been by my
what project? That was called
council.
like this
Pacer rate.
pace rate?
Yeah, we did a pacer stay, and we've got some updated information on that. Tammy was working, I think she had it all ready to go, and we go. So if, and again, I don't know that it will,
Well, can we
won't
hear
impact
what
the
you-
budget. Sure, I'm sorry.
Because
I have ideas. I had 84
Well, let's
miles
hear
of
'em.
asphalt roads where I came from. We had a lot more equipment, but we didn't have a lot more money. We had $1 million in our asphalt budget. That was with some special funds that we used, but there's ideas out there, and Mike and I are working on these together. We've been talking about a lot of them. I would agree that I've talked to a few of the public that maybe curb and gutter doesn't have to be done everywhere right now. And there's maybe some things we could do. I hate to throw anything out there too specific yet. I've been here since June 1st. And so part of it is just been getting used to the system and what we have and the resources available. But I'm trying not to say too much, but I really do have ideas, and I hope to be able to use those. I think over those 84 miles of roads we had in Republic County, I improved them in my time there, and I think most people would agree with that there. So we implemented different things that they've never done before, but our crews are limited here, and a lot of it's contract work, but we're getting ready to go out this week yet, and hopefully do some full depth patching, some different things that they've never done yet. So hopefully some of those things will move us forward.
On 98?
On 98 and on a few other locations. Try to get the worst ones right now, but part of it's just getting used to our crews, to my crews, to the equipment that we have. So I guess patience is all on my end that I would ask.
And I appreciate that. You've been here since June,
Mhm.
and some of those folks that have lived on 98th Street's been here for, 10, 15, 20 years and longer. So, and I understand being patient, I get it, I'm glad you got ideas. Hopefully there's some ideas that we can utilize and make work. But I'm ready to act on something.
One thing
A
people need to
plan, let's
remember
get a
is,
plan together, and let's get it. We always, and I know I do, because I live on 98th, and I joke about it, and I talk about it, but it's not a joke. I mean, it's bad. And,
It is.
And we need, and people deserve, I mean, we're sitting here discussing how we build a $10 million new city hall, and we got roads that we can't drive down. And so, before I'd ever consider signing off on approving a new city hall to be built, our roads will be straightened out to our citizens that do pay the taxes here, have something they can travel on. That's all.
And I would concur, I don't think every road should be curb, gutter, and sidewalk, right? Some of that comes with a funding source, right? But I think what you're looking for, I think, is what would be considered a typical county section road, right? Which those roads, I mean, our biggest problem is too narrow and too hilly. But that being said, I mean, a good county section road should have at least 24 feet of driving lane, right? 12, I mean, that's kind of ideal. And you want some shoulder, it doesn't have to be asphalt shoulder, but some shoulder. Then you go into a ditch and then back to the other side. But you're still gonna need 60 plus feet of right of way. So, right, because to get the ditch, you can't have ditches like this because you can't maintain them, or you can't have side slopes coming down the road. Those are some of the problems we have out there. They're there. But then we got areas, you know, where the state bought a lot of right of way, and we can work with that. So I don't want to come across saying there's one size fits all on roads. Right. I think you're in the 98th and 102nds and some of those. Whether it's a chip seal, whether it's a different type of paving, I mean, even if it's asphalt, you know, part of it is what's under it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we need to get more. How much room do we have? Where are the utilities? Right, that's kind of where the engineering pieces come in. So if I have a recommendation, it's going to be getting with our engineer, finding out what it would cost to expand that study to, you know, the full stretch. Because we know in the south end, one of the things when we were working on that south end of 98, when we were going to expand the sewer to go up to what was then known as the Raintree Apartment Project, there's undersized water lines. So, you know, BPU wanted to get in there and replace the water lines, and then you're trying to get the sewer brought in up there. And then, as we all know, we already have to spend a fair amount of money fixing that little water crossing, and all of it's in the floodplain. And so, it's, you know, sometimes just, again, I'm gonna say throwing asphalt on it, yeah, it'll give you a nice ride for 2 years, and then you're back. I mean, I think what we did on Edwardsville Drive, when we did the south part of it, and we put the curb and gutter, and then we went and we milled off everything down to the concrete and replaced that, and I think I said then, you're probably gonna get about a good 10-year life, and then you're gonna start to see the problems of edges falling off and the reflective cracking coming back through, which is roughly what's going on today, right? Because we still only have 18 feet of concrete underneath the edge of the road. So,
Well, I clearly don't.
I don't know
believe-
that it makes any, from the standpoint of budget, I don't see it impacting this. We would do it through the debt is the
Okay.
place to do it. And or
I
we
clearly
may be
don't
able to
know
do
the
it under
answer.
special sales tax. And we do have $100,000 allocated to special sales tax for roads. It gets into, again, spending the money to get the proper engineering and all that stuff and buying the right of way, which gets expensive, or putting asphalt on roads.
I think there's some sections out there that can be repaired.
Sure.
I think, and like I said, I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying, and that's not what I get paid to do, or I get elected to do, is know the answer. I get elected to vote on what you guys bring to us. But I think that there's probably some areas on 98th Street that could be repaired.
Sure.
That would allow us, that would, well, maybe this ain't the right term, buy us some time until we do maybe a study, because all that's gonna take time. But in the meanwhile, I think that there's some things that we can do that would make that area more traversable.
More driving.
I like my word better.
And that's just
Traversing.
Yeah.
Traversing.
So, there we go. So, that's all.
I think we need to get back to the budget.
Yeah. All right.
Well, this is, if you don't live on 98th Street, that might not be important to you.
Right.
And we're talking about the budget.
Right.
And this is the opportunity and the time that we have to talk about it.
And the
So
reason
I am
I
gonna
brought
talk
it
about
up
it
is
now.
because since I've been here, we've passed a few budgets, but we've been talking about some of the streets every year
Right.
that haven't addressed them. And so that's why I brought it up on a budget night, is so we can maybe start finding those solutions and put them into motion, so.
And I would agree, we've gotten off of the plan we were putting in place. So, the first part of that plan was hitting every one of our neighborhood streets and getting them repaved and curb fixed, and we did that. And we did some of our commercial streets, and we did that. But where we haven't made the headway we should have is what I would call those north-south, we generally call them collector type streets, right? So how do we get those improved before we can replace? Because we couldn't replace all the roads, I think it was grand. I mean, I got a whole other chart on debt that we could look at, which we won't. But the good thing is, when you look at cities of the second class in the 4 counties that make up the marked area on the Kansas side, you look at our indebtedness on any number of factors, we're generally number 3. By 3, 1 being best, 12 being low. So, for example, we have about $8 million outstanding debt. Our friends at KCK, not to be right there at KCK, are 1.4 trillion. So, you look at billion, yeah, 1.4 billion. Yeah, billion, 1.4 billion, yeah, trillion. It looks like a big number to me. That's a lot of debt. You look at our debt per person.
Well, I wasn't thinking we'd issue quite that much.
No,
but,
yeah. I'm just saying, we have some capacity, and we're not putting, I mean, our debt per capita, so per person, we're around 1,800. Average is around 2,400. Again, I don't mean to be on the KCK is almost 9,800. And when you compare them to cities like Topeka and Wichita, those are all in the $2,800 range. So we've done a good job in managing our debt, and we have capacity to use debt to make public improvements. That's the summary of that. So, all right, I'm going to move forward a little bit here. As you know, our recommendation is to reduce the mill levy by 1.5. That leaves us with a fund balance right at 15%, which is our policy on ending cash balance. It puts us at about $933,000. So again, as I said earlier, when you look at our mill levy, I mean, we've been reducing it consistently over the last number of years. We are better at reducing the tax burden than our other fellow taxing entities. So I think, and again, I say this collectively because it takes everybody to make this happen. I think we're doing a good job. I'm not going to really spend much time on the state forms. Just remember the state form always looks different than what we actually do because you include all your cash on the state form. And we know that our assessed valuation will be less than what we originally got by $1 million, give or take. And we factored that into our overall budget. I'm just trying to move forward. If we need to go back. Debt service. This debt service does include the cost and interest for the bonds we talked about tonight, the $2.575 million. So that's already built into our number here. So that's not going to be coming back with a change on that. Again, as I said, from a debt standpoint, we've done an excellent job. Special sales tax. This is the sales tax that was adopted a number of years ago. It has 3 primary purposes: fire, EMS, streets, parks and rec. As you notice, since we were talking about streets, the $100,000. When we first did this, we were taking some money out of here and using it for debt service, because most of our debt's in streets. We stopped doing that a couple of years ago. So that gives us the ability to spend it on what I would call mid-sized projects, which is how we've used it. That in our special street fund, or where we fund what I would call the non-bonded projects that we need to do. And again, I'm just trying to, special highway fund, this is gas tax, it's pretty well money in, money, out. We do fund, we do transfer to the debt fund $125,000 out of this fund, which is, one of the permitted uses. It is a limited fund, so you can't just put this money in general fund and spend it, so it has a specific purpose. Our sewer fund, It's been going about as we anticipated. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of history early on, and we're still kind of getting our hands around some of those bigger capital items. You know, the one thing we need to definitely do is map out our sewer system, so we know what we have, where we have, and put it, like other things, on a maintenance schedule, so we don't end up with the same problems with roads, with sewers degrade, as well as other public utilities. We're not assuming any changes in the sewer rates unless something changes on our contractual agreement on that side. Solid waste, thank you, gentlemen. The solid waste is, it came from a couple years ago. We were a little worried because we started with some negative cash. It was mainly a timing issue, but we have a pretty solid plan here. The bids, or the RFPs, I don't know if they went out today or going out, they've gone out. And we expect to bring that back to the council at the end of September for recommendations. So we'll see how those come in. We did make those, so there's a number of options in it, right? So we can look at service options. Again, for example, do you do recycling once a week or every other week? Do you add some service? Do you take away some service? Do you include commercial? Do you not? So we set it up to where we can look at those. Special event fund. Obviously, we're not having really a special event in the traditional sense this year at Autumn Fest. So obviously, most of that money comes in by sponsors and goes out in expenses. Our technology fund, again, is kind of a pass-through. This is where we capture expenses related to technology that are citywide. So server, backups, fiber if we had it, those kind of things. Departments pay for their own stuff. So my recommendation still, as it was a general fund budget of $6,239,075, all funds. And I have to preface this there again, because the way the state does the two tax funds is higher than what we do, again, with all the cash. They assume you're going to spend all your cash. We tend to not spend all our cash. And I'm continuing to recommend a mill levy reduction of 1.5 mils. That all being said, Mayor, we need to open the public hearing.
We need a motion to open the public hearing on this.
Yes,
Make a motion to open the public hearing regarding the budget.
Second.
for 2020.
Second.
Would the clerk please call roll?
Adam?
Yes.
Cahar?
Yes.
Malat?
Yes.
Shriver? Stites?
Yes.
Okay, officially the public hearing is open. So at this time, we are open to have any comments from the public. State your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
Gary Carpenter, 11030 Riverview. I just want to say thanks for not defunding the police department.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any other? Apparently there are no others from the public who wish to make any comments, so we would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams?
Yes.
Cahar?
Yes.
Malat?
Yes.
Shriver?
Yes.
Stites?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda will be consider certifying the fiscal year 2021 annual budget.
I believe you should have that. Is it in the packet or at this place?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the certificates. As presented.
Mike, I did have a quick question. We went through the end pretty quickly, and I'm hoping not to
sorry.
take too long. No, that's okay. I know we kind of stalled out earlier a little bit, but on the proposed revenues, it's always nice if our revenues don't exceed our expenditures, and we're about $125,000 in the hole for the budget. One thing that I noticed that might help close that gap, and I don't know if this is an option, but in the Parks and Rec, we have $65,000 set aside for a vehicle to be used by grounds position, as well as funding for potential rehab of the park equipment shed. Is there a little cushion that we might be able to
That's in the
adopt from
that's
that or
in-
somewhere else?
Yeah, that's in the special sales tax.
So that doesn't even help our $125,000 deficit there. Okay.
I think my question now is, in the motion to certify this, are numbers needed in the motion?
Well, the numbers are on the certification, so
Okay.
you don't necessarily need, because when you're
We don't need to
certifying,
include numbers in the motion?
it's on the
Okay.
certification.
Very good.
So that is assuming that we're going to certify the numbers. And I spoke about a 2 mil reduction, and I still would like to see a 2 mil reduction. And that is what I'm making a motion for a 2 mil reduction in the 2021 budget.
And we can, yeah.
So Mike, if we were gonna do a 2 mil reduction, would we need to change some numbers or how would, if we wanted to do that, what would we do from here?
So, Zach, I think is going to grab, so, we tried to put together those. So if it's 2 mil reduction, generally what will happen is the amount for the ad valorem 2020 tax number will go down. And so the total taxes will be reduced. And that's what would get submitted to the county.
I'm going to make a comment about that. The trouble I see with reducing it even more is you don't really affect the residents that much, but most of your taxes come from commercial, so you're giving them the biggest benefit. So you're really not benefiting a heck of a lot the residential people. And so, and now you're talking about wanting to go and spend more money on 98th Street, now you want to cut it even more. So that would be my opposition to lowering it.
How much is
And that's-
the 0.5 difference?
Let me get.
I just, since Chuck
It's
mentioned it last meeting.
about, each quarter is about 18,000, so it's about $37,000. Going from 1.5 to 2 would reduce the taxes, the amount of tax revenues by about $30,000.
So basically, what will happen is we'll just take another roughly $50,000 out of the reserve fund. So what's the net result?
Yes.
If that doesn't help our residents, is there something else we could do to offset their out-of-pocket expenses or something that would be more tangible to help residents during this year where their income's lower?
Well, there's a couple, in my opinion, there's a couple things that, and I have mentioned this in the past, as far as attracting developers and people in our, when they see, they don't have to know how much it affects every resident, which it is gonna affect the residents some, and every little bit that we do. Because next year, when I ask for 6 mils reduction, on top of these 2, it'll be 8. And which will be, just like Mark, what was your statement, gradual, what was that you said?
Creeping change.
Creeping change. And so when people look at that and they see that mill levy at that high number, it's a turnoff immediately.
We heard a presentation at the EDC from a commercial realtor who said that on the commercial side, their consideration for property taxes is about 10 down the list.
So, great. It made the list.
Well, I wouldn't call 10 down the list a major issue about making the list.
Do you have the, on the 2 mil, it's about 30, do you have the number difference?
I can get that. As far as what it
So
means.
the revenue reduction is, so general fund right now is at 2,523, 365 at the state worksheet, so.
A mill is about, 1 mil represents about,
Yeah,
just
we
a
know
round number, about
30
75,000.
It was about 36,000, 18 something per mil, but do you have, for certification purposes, do you have at 2 mil certification?
I do. So for the 2 mil reduction,
What would the ad valorem tax for general fund be?
$2,486,041.
Did you hear, if I may, just, if I'll have, so on the sheet you have in front of you, calculate 1.5. So where it says general fund, and right now it says 2,523,365. At 2 mil, that number would be, if you'll say that again for us, please.
$2,400,000 or $2,486,041.
That's the difference. Total price.
For the general fund.
Now, I just for clarity, I heard Mayor, I believe there was a motion by
There was a motion, but there is not been a second.
Yeah, so I'm just saying there was a motion made. I think we were getting clarification, so the clarification would be the certificate page would reduce that number as we just read out. And we'll make the other correction to the rest of the page. So just wanted to make sure we're on the same place.
Do I need to say that number, or?
I think we've got it. I mean,
Got it, okay.
a 2 mil, at 2
Okay.
mil reduction, the general fund ad valorem tax will be $2,486,041.
And just for clarity's sake, the state budget form is going to reflect a greater than 2 mil reduction because we are assuming the changes in the assessed valuation.
Will reducing our reserve fund that much have any impact on our bond rating?
It could. It's going to put us at, I think here's the bigger, it'll probably put us at about 14.5% reserve versus 15%. I think there's probably some expectation that cities are dipping into their reserves right now, right, I think it would be considered that's not unusual. I think what we have to be cautious would be if we continue not to meet our fund reserves year after year after year, that's probably going to have a bigger impact on it. I'm sure there will be we're going to have a bond rate call in the next week. I have to get on sometime. And I would imagine that question will come up. What did you do? Why did you do it? You know, et cetera, and so forth. So it'll be a topic of discussion. I think the pieces we have to keep our mill levy, or keep us in good shape is we still have a solid reserve. We have our policies in place. We've been good fiscal stewards. So I don't know in and of itself that going from 1.5 to 2 will make a big change. I think there'll be more discussion, why did you use it at all, to be quite honest.
So are we about $37,000 in that change? I would, just a rough estimate, about
37,324.
I missed the question.
37,000, is that in the difference?
Between a 1.5 and a 2,
Yeah.
about, because 1 mil is about, just using round numbers, about 75,000, give or take. It might be 76 and some change, but you're around there.
There might be a chance that there's some cushion, because we did a few things with cushion in them anyway.
Right.
As a just in case we need it. I'm wondering if we'll end up by the end of the fiscal year that we're already planning, that wouldn't even be quite a $37,000 hit to be able to do a 2 mil reduction.
That's
We
right.
might end up a lot closer to 25,000.
And I think, the outstanding, the things that are out there that are probably unknowns a little bit, right, is, we know what we've submitted for CARES Act funding, and we built that into this budget, right? So we did build that, it's supposed to be reimbursable expenses, so we know that. But there's still some things out there that could come into play, that where we haven't funded through FEMA or some things like that, so there could be some dollars come back to those. And on the other side is, who knows how long we're going to continue to be in some mechanism of COVID response, and what's going to happen you know, what's gonna happen with that, and how long it's gonna go, what other changes might be out there. And I think that's probably why a lot of cities probably have taken a, don't change the mill levy, keep the revenues up, because they're worried about it. And quite honestly, if you're in a city that's very dependent on sales tax, like I got a big mall, I would be saying the same thing. If you had one industry, like an airline industry, or building aircraft industry, as you can see down in the Wichita Falls area, I would be very concerned about this kind of adjustment, to be real honest.
Well, we're in a much better position, thankfully.
So again, Mayor, I would just say you have a motion, I don't know if there's a second, and then.
So far, there's not been a second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to adjust it to a 2 mil reduction. Would the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar,
Yes.
Malat,
No.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stipes,
Yes.
And I believe the mayor,
and Mayor McTaggart.
No.
motion passes.
Okay, motion carries.
We will make the adjustment, do we have a page that they can sign on?
Well, technically, the page that they have should be the one to sign up. For some reason, the lines aren't showing up when I print them, so I will get that prepared and ready for your signatures and just let you know when it's ready, but it will reflect that.
I think we have to have three, I mean, we always prefer to have everybody, this form is set up for commissions, right? So all these forms are set up for counties, so they always say, get your 3 commissioners to sign it. Like, we don't have 3 commissioners. So, anyway.
So you're gonna do this tonight so we can sign it?
Yes, sir, it'll be ready tomorrow to come in and sign.
Yeah, we'll do it, so can you come in tomorrow, the next day, it'll be fine? Or is that
So it's
possible?
not due tomorrow?
Well, it's due, it's due to the county. All of our budget sheets are due tomorrow, but the deadline is the 25th, and they're aware that we're having this public hearing on the 24th, and they'll get it tomorrow or the day after. That's not a consideration.
So we can't just change the number tonight?
Well, the number is changed. I just want to get the sheets ready for signatures.
Is that something we can do? I mean, what do you gotta do to get the sheet?
You just push print?
I can, yeah, I mean, I
They just
can.
need to sign.
Yeah, there's an area down here, and I'm not sure why it's not printing, so
Just
I
get
can,
everybody to sign it.
I
We'll
can,
do the new
I can
form.
mess around with it now and see what I can do so I can get
Yeah,
it before we
let's
leave.
just let them sign it. It's such a, yeah, we just, everybody sign in that blank spot there.
Mhm. Let me get it.
We'll call good.
We're gonna go on to budgetary reports while he's doing that.
I make a motion to get rid of all state budget forms. Anyways, well, I was gonna talk a little bit about 98th Street, the STP. The other item we have is, it's a smaller project, it's for sidewalks that would connect from town center area here into the park, so, you know, it's been something, it's a smaller project, but, one that last year, a couple of years ago, there was quite a bit of talk about more sidewalk projects versus trail projects, right? Some trails are 10-foot wide type thing versus traditional sidewalks. There's a number of cities, even including Kansas City, Missouri, that said, we need to start thinking more about the basics and not necessarily some of these other things. So, we got both of those going. Other than that, I'm not sure I have anything else to add, but
Okay.
so,
Well, when question comes back, I'll ask him, but we're gonna move on to the chief's, Chief Mathies.
I just appreciate the clarification on some of that stuff. It just makes our job a lot easier and it's not so interpretive, if you will. So appreciate that action and I'm glad we could clarify those things. And it's been a shoot zone by name forever and a day, before our time, like you said. And it has been a discussion every year. So if we can clean that up, I think that's a great thing and let's move forward.
Thank you. Chief Whip.
Nothing.
Nothing, okay. Dusty?
Already said a lot.
Okay.
But one thing that I do, you mentioned the pothole holding water stuff. One thing I encourage you to look at, when you see a pothole, look at the side of the road. The ditch probably isn't draining a lot of times. And that's one thing that is a very difficult thing to get public cooperation on, is cleaning ditches. So we'll be looking to do some of that, or I would like to, in discussing with folks. But There's one thing that we need council support on when it comes to some of those things, because you have to mess up some yards to do that. Now we'll do everything to put it back, but so that's something to think about just as generally with those roads. So, thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have anything?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
It was mentioned earlier about an economic development position. Just for clarification, it wasn't us that hired a consultant to go find businesses. It was the developer that hired the consultant to look at possible businesses that come in. So we did not spend the money for that. The consultant did that as part of their package, so it's not a separate issue. But I do think it's something we've talked about on and off, maybe a contractual basis, having somebody that we have a contract with that spends a certain amount of time looking for businesses to go up on the north end, or any part of Edwardsville, quite frankly. But I think maybe in our discussions, after we get the trash thing out of the way, get that settled, and move on and start heading into the next budget cycle, as we look at somebody. I don't think it's appropriate for a full-time person, but on a contractual basis, somebody that just snoops around the country and is kind of connected all over, that keep their ears to the ground, be good thing to do.
I'm going to interrupt you. Zach, have you got anything to add?
Only to say that the second round of CARES funding applications are open, and we are looking at ways to see how the city can fit into those. They're a little bit more restrictive than that first round, but the applications in certain areas related to connectivity are due at the end of the week, so we're hoping to put together some kind of package that fits within that criteria, and we'll keep you updated.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Hey Zach, does that connectivity include, is that internet connectivity, or like technical, or is it more like roads?
It's internet connectivity.
Okay, I think if we wanted anything from the last one is to pad it. Because we were seeing so much, as far as I know our city, we're really, as we run a tight budget and we do everything fiscally responsibly, some of our neighbors do not, and they're getting paid extra for that. And so if we can find anything that would get us more of an edge on that, would be.
And that's kind of the tack that we're taking. I mentioned it's a little bit more restrictive in that it's some of the areas a little bit more defined from a technical standpoint of what you can do, and that really limits us as far as what we can go out for, but we're trying to be as creative as we can with our applications in the hopes that we can get some kind of funding through that.
That would be great. I think even if you look at the different areas, like KCK has Google Fiber.
Right.
Piper generally has more, and I'm looking at the school district, so
Right.
when I'm talking through, Piper, Turner, I think might have some Google Fiber as well. Piper, median income is substantially higher than ours, and so I think we could present a case to say, hey, we have significant need here, and if you all are making the call that our students are gonna be home half of the year, I think we're doing a couple days in, a couple days out in Piper, Edwardsville, we could really easily justify some serious.
Oh, we could certainly justify it from a need standpoint. What makes it difficult is the timeline that the state has put out, and that a lot of these infrastructure projects need to be done and spent by the end of the year.
Okay.
So that really limits, I think a lot of communities are trying to figure out, well, how the heck are we going to do these large-scale infrastructure projects related to internet connectivity, whether it be Wi-Fi or broadband, within the span of what will essentially be 3.5 months.
Would it count if we're under contract with someone before that?
I asked that question. I was in a webinar with the state last week, and they were not sure. They will get back to us.
The last answer in the first round, which went to the federal government, was no. You have to have the money substantially, it has to be spent, and the service has to be, whatever that is, in operation, so you can, CARES, whatever. So, because that was a big discussion we had in the first committee about, could you have a contract? So could I have a contract, somebody do something for a year and I prepay it?
Right.
And that was not, I don't think that they'll change.
You also can't apply it towards things like our broadband study that we had mentioned earlier this summer, and I might still go out for it anyway, just to see if what gets kicked back, because there's no harm in trying, but at this point, it's pretty, the guy, every time I've asked the question, well, can we do this, and trying to find that wiggle room, they're taking the strictest interpretation of the guidelines that they've been given. But my read from the state is they want to say yes, but they can't, but they're being as rigid to the guidelines that they've been given, so they're not disappointing anyone later. So I'm kind of reading between the lines and put in for what you want, and hopefully it gets accepted.
Absolutely, and if we need to do, pushing something as far as council to get it approved or plan something, that would be helpful to the community.
Well, I think the actions that the council's taken already to form a broadband committee and to be public, and we've got anecdotal evidence that we've got these pockets of unserved areas, that's gonna help us. From a technical standpoint, what they rely on a lot, as far as need to justify it, is FCC data. And that really does not play in our favor because we have a lot of coverage if you can spend the $10,000 to get your house connected. And it's just a matter of making that case that we are underserved, not in terms of the amount of options we have, but that it's cost prohibitive in a lot of cases for our residents.
Especially for the income of our households. Thank you for doing that. I know that's a lot of work and that can make a huge difference to our people. Mike, how's the conversation coming along? Have we talked to the judge yet about community service and trash pickup?
It's in play. I mean, we've
That's
given them all the, I should know something. They have the documents from prosecutor, judge, so we told them we were ready to go in September. So
Okay, so we might be seeing people out doing it next month.
we assigned right now the second and fourth Friday, so we're ready internally to do it. Obviously, he has to have, and they don't have to actually be the judge to get that. I mean, if somebody even has a moving citation, right, and they come to the court, they can execute the agreement. So all pieces are there.
That, I'm
Follow
really
with
excited
them.
for that.
It's new. I think it's going to take a couple of deals for them to figure out how, who and how. I mean,
Sure.
it's pretty open-ended for participation.
Okay. Going right down through my list quickly, quick update, since our last meeting, the Wyandotte County health official has also shut down sports for, basically all of Wyandotte County. Just an update on the statewide, COVID, as of today, the hub said the total ICU beds available in the state are 697, while only 64 of those are being used for COVID patients. We have 708 ventilators in the state of Kansas, only 22 are being used for COVID patients, so I feel like when they've asked us to stabilize the curve, we've done that. What I would really hope to hear from the health official and those making the decisions is where's the end goal? What are we shooting for? What number, at what point can we start relieving the shutdowns and I know that they have different levels that we're going to, but I kind of like a number associated with that. That would be really helpful. And then lastly, I think it's awesome that we were able to reduce the mills. What I would love to see, and I know we've gotten some emails, and Mike and I have talked about this before, is being a little more creative or finding solutions in what we can do outside of our mill levy scope. And so what I would like to work on for the next year is creative ideas around the community college, because the amount that they get from our community is atrocious considering how much we benefit from them. And then the library system, they also take a huge chunk, and I feel like we might be able to find some better solutions there. And so I just thought while it's kind of late in the year for that now, I'd really like to be pushing momentum that way to give us more tax relief for the next year's budget. And that is all.
Okay, Gary?
I have nothing.
Okay, Margaret?
I'd like to send on a couple of comments that Carolyn brought up, echo the library tax that could be researched as far as what the city does pay as far as on the county level and what goes to the Bonner Springs library tax. And secondly, the community college. So it is Kansas City, Kansas Community College. And we are not in Kansas City, Kansas. So opened my eyes and think I've never even thought of that. I don't know the history behind that, but I think it's worth looking into. Mike, going back to the budget, are you going to do a salary survey, a salary study? Are you gonna have somebody do it? Are you gonna do it?
What we've done here over the last few years is we use a number of different resources. So Mid-America Regional Council partners with a company that, so they get information both from our region and all across the nation that we pay a fee to access.
There's a lot of free tools too.
Right. I mean,
That's why I'm asking.
I say it's free, it's a, it's a very low cost, hard to say. The league has its deal. We've done some just more localized, the information is public information, so we.
No, but that's kind of hard to compare the chief here and chief there. That's not,
Yeah,
there's a whole lot more involved, so.
Right.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think, could we go out and hire a company to do it? I think this is my opinion, I don't know that we're gonna find a different answer than what we probably have looked at through these other resources. And really, I think if you're gonna, and I'm not opposed to going out and hiring a professional firm, then I think we have to be prepared, though, are we prepared to implement those recommendations and fund them? Right.
And usually they come back with a range.
Right, yeah, but I mean, if that is, people are here and it's here, and that's a, $100,000 change in pay range, are we gonna be prepared to fund them? Because I would say, there's nothing, I would say it's discouraging from an employee standpoint, is they see the city go invest in a pay study that says that they should be paid this, and then the city doesn't do that. Again, I'm
And
taking
traditionally,
that.
nobody goes back and pay.
Oh.
Traditionally, nobody goes back and pay.
No.
Once you do something like that. Can I
Right.
ask
But
you
not
this?
that they go back, but I mean, if I'm making $12 an hour and the pay study says I should be making 15, but we keep them at 12, they're like, well, why didn't you do a pay study? They're not gonna pay you what I'm worth.
Sure.
And that's seen that happen.
That's for everything else.
Yeah.
Experience, there's
Sure.
all sorts of.
Oh, absolutely.
So for every year, but probably the last 6, 7, 8 years,
Right.
all of the employees have received raises.
Yes.
I believe.
Now,
And I'm proud to be up here to do that
Right.
because we have excellent employees.
now, if they're in probationary period, so I said we do them
Right.
on January 1. If somebody's in the probationary period, then it doesn't go into effect until the end of their
Correct.
probationary period. But effectively, yes, we budgeted for and funded.
Well, I hope you
Pay
can get that straightened out. It bothered me a little bit when you said we've kind of not done this and that.
Well, we haven't done the COLA adjustments to the
Right.
pay plan.
Just to be consistent helps
Right. Right.
you out, or every department out, so. But every employee does a great job, and proud of them, because there are a lot of businesses, a lot of companies, a lot of cities where it's not gonna happen
That's
next
true.
year.
Absolutely.
What is the cost of the drone?
It's around $5,000.
Is it,
And if we buy that one, we can get another one for $1,800.
I think we will still try to. I
just
think there's a-
curious, it wasn't in
Yeah.
there.
I think there's an opportunity from a public opportunity, right? And we have people out there that want to help contribute to it. So I think we should reach out to people now. What we can't, we can't have 5 different people out going and buying them and doing something, but as a fundraiser opportunity to support the police, support the drone program, I think it would be worth putting something together around that. And whatever the money is, the money. I mean, it's not like if we don't do it, it dies. But maybe it's a good community engagement tool, right? Because people, we've had people come and say they want to participate, and so great if they're willing to contribute to it financially. I think that's a wonderful opportunity.
Sorry, was the child drowning, was that Edwardsville? I thought it was KCK,
Basically.
but right in.
Yeah, we were all there to help.
Right.
Well, there's a few issues with it. I would have
That's all I have, thank you.
I've got a question related to Margaret's comment, and you were talking about that lady that came in and offered, do you have to create a foundation to receive contributions?
Well, we need to form a foundation.
Because I don't think they can make
You
contributions.
can't make a tax exempt. So what we basically have everything ready to go. If you recall, as part of our development agreement for the Hard Rock Hotel, there was a provision in there to make a contribution to start our foundation.
Okay, yeah.
You don't have to do that, but what we would do is there's and I can't remember the property, but there's a big foundation, a Kansas City something foundation.
Yeah, I know
That
what
covers,
it is.
I mean,
Yeah,
hundreds and
it's the
hundreds
Casey
of-
Foundation.
Right.
and
You can
they
even
could
set up
be-
your
it
own-
could be funded, it would have to be funneled through that,
Right.
yeah.
So what you do is you create a fund inside the foundation,
Yeah.
and then the fund, so if I want a
Contributions would be
contribution, I
sent
make
to
to
the
that
Casey
fund.
Foundation.
They take care of all the tax notices and all that. They charge you a fee.
Yeah.
I think it's $750 a year. And they take care of all the tax notices and sending out all the information and manage it. It's effectively the same one that UG uses for, what is that, the Speedway Grant Program and a number of those. So a lot of
Well, the
organizations.
T-Bones was the one I'm thinking,
They use that too,
the
yeah.
money is channeled through the Casey
Right.
Foundation.
Yeah, and that's a great way to do it.
And
You don't have to-
the Wyandotte County Parks Foundation uses them as well.
That way you don't have to fund, create a 501c3, keep
Yeah.
up all the paperwork, do the annual reports. They take care of all of
Yeah,
that.
if they do that, then you don't have to create a 501c3.
Absolutely. And that's how we'll do that. We were moving on a different path.
Chuck?
You were done.
I
Oh,
have
I'm
one more
sorry.
thing, I'm sorry, I did.
I thought,
I know,
I
we're
would
moving
have
on.
waited.
There was some comments about the Uniform Public Offense Code that it is nice to see that probably there are a lot more residents watching the meetings, engaging, reading through the minutes, and glad it's going to help the police department. That's kind of a very fuzzy area. So, but Carolyn had a great idea to put that on the website or a link. Is there any way to track those links? I think I've asked you that before to see how many people go on.
Actually, click on them. There may be functionality on the website. I know if we put a link in the hotshot, I can see how many people click
And
on
I
it.
think that's helped a lot too when you put some snippets about them. Obviously, you've always
Mhm.
done that, but I think that engages a lot more people, so I think that's helped a ton.
Right, and I will put that UPOC on there, but not until we get our ordinance finalized, so they can reference that as well as the changes that we are making to it. So I don't want them to look at the UPOC as is and assume that is what the city has put forth, because we make it, that's what this whole discussion has been about, is about what are we pulling out to make it better fit for
Right.
Edwardsville.
Right. And Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
thank you for coming and commending Mike and Chuck. Obviously, I didn't realize that it was that the fire department does a burning the brush, which thank goodness they clean up the city and burning the brush. Because I think Zach put a picture in there.
They were at the gun range, and they did some work at the cemetery, and I believe they'll be
Right.
doing some work along the 4th Street, Spot Methodist Church.
What happened,
Parks, trails,
fire just kind of got away, or?
we're trying to figure out if we had a member or something move across, or somebody else come out and help, because they left.
Right. Were the firemen there? Were they running to get another load?
Well, I mean, they went back out and
Gotcha.
kind of,
I didn't realize they did that, so.
this is not the first time we've always burned the brush piles when it's gotten uncontrollable. We've been working on trail management along the river and
Right.
parks, and if you
You can
remember last
tell where
spring, we burned off
cleaned
Park
out.
Park, so
Exactly.
they're going to get ready to start on, we've done the culverts just north of Shelton, that leads the farms,
Right.
and we've done the river bed, or the creek bed in front of the United Methodist Church. And we're getting ready to start here later this week. We've already coordinated with Dusty so that we can cut it down, and then they can haul it back up there to that location and be burned off and dried out.
Well, it sure makes a lot of areas look nice, so thank you. That's all.
Okay, so, again, now,
Well, I'm glad to have the budget process behind us. It's always something that you can breathe easy when that's over and taken care of. And it's easier, you guys put in a lot of work and appreciate it. But I'm glad that the 98th Street conversation came up during this meeting tonight. It may have taken a little of our time, but I think that it was needed time to put towards that. And I think that we'll figure out some ways that we can get that, or Dusty's ideas that he's got filed away and locked in a vault that he's got bringing from western Kansas, I guess. But I appreciate that we're able to, that we discussed that. You mentioned, Dusty, about cleaning the ditches, and I remember, and you guys might too help me, but the fire department used to come out, this is way back, and they would blow those ditches out under people's driveways that get clogged up, because people don't maintain them, is what happens. And they get built up on the end, and then the water runs out and goes down the road, and then wherever it finds back. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a possibility again. I don't know whatever happened to that, or why it ever happened to begin with, or who started it, or why it stopped. But I remember specifically, my mom and dad's, that fire hose would go towards the end, they'd blow it out the other end, and hey, life's good, it's all clean again.
In between the culverts needed too is some of the problem,
Sure.
and that's where you get into some kickback from the public because you're messing up the grass and stuff. Even out in the country, you got that, sometimes if you went by a house, if you were just all fields, it wasn't such a big deal.
Sure.
So my goal is to work in smaller areas where there isn't so much kickback for a while and then see where we go. Yeah. But that may be
That
something.
was an option, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, that was just something I threw out there. It was an
Yeah,
idea that I wasn't gonna keep
That
locking
is
away.
part of, so you recall, one of the other things, so we did an inventory of our storm water inventory, right? But one of the things in a good stormwater plan is ditch maintenance, and it has cost, and I know there's different methods of handling that, that's where stormwater fees come in, et cetera, but maintaining the ditches helps maintain the roads.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
is one's not done, and we just have a lot of areas, I'm not telling you all anything you don't know, you get these narrow, you get a 20-foot wide street, and both sides of it comes down, or it drops off the pavement couple of feet down, and then you got another side, it just, all correctable, it all takes some work, and some of it is, they haven't been touched for, since maybe they were county roads in some cases.
Well, it sounds like that we're working toward getting them,
Yeah.
taking some action, so that's great. As far as the CARES Act, and I agree with what was being said about trying to go to that, being creative on what we're going after. Something that I know that I'll go back to something my dad used to say to me all the time when I was young, and still, I'm older. You miss 100% of the shots that you never take. And if we don't set that and try to go after something, the worst thing that can happen is someone says no to you. So that's all right. We can accept no. So anyway, that I think this is our opportunity to try to attack some of that money and hopefully put it to good use. Mike, you said something about the 2 Fridays, or you got it set for the 2nd and 4th. I think Friday for trash to pick up, something like that. I'd really like to see a Saturday myself, because people that are working that might not be able to put time in. I know that when I was at KCK PD, that's when they did it, was on Saturdays. Because people that did have jobs, they needed to be at work. That wasn't even an option. So if Saturday, and maybe it's a Friday and a Saturday, so they could, a Friday the 1st of the month, and then at the end of the month it's a Saturday. So anyway, just throwing that out there, you all figure that one out. But I'd like to see a Saturday. Cram the Cruiser, is that going to happen this year? No. Okay.
We are
Answers my question.
trying to look at an alternative thought, but part of the problem has been the COVID, the gathering limitations, the number of personnel you can have in a spot. And then with the number of small businesses that have contributed in the past, that have taken a hit, we unfortunately had to come to the conclusion that there was no feasible way that we could put together a ride and be well within the parameters of the guidelines set by the government and the CDC.
Okay. Last thing I have to say is as far as what Chuck Adams said, was the someone going out in a position to attract business. I think that's important. I'd like to look into something like that, what that would look like. That's it.
Chuck, somebody taught me this years ago, the answer's always no if you don't ask.
That's right. That's right.
That's true.
Yeah, it is. I didn't make it up. Somebody told me that.
Thought you were gonna take credit for taking.
No, I know better than
One wise
that. I
man.
know better than that. I got some others that you don't want to hear up here. Mike, thank you very much for your work. Zach, you too. And thank everybody for their hard work on putting together this budget. We're gonna make it. Other than that, I have nothing more to add. We are adjourned.